Chapter 4. The Strongest Curse. Another day, another yawn let out as I did my daily relic polishing. The imperial capital had seen a series of incidents over the past few days, but this day, like the previous one, was just fine. Lazily basking in the sun shining through my specially made windows, I became acutely aware of how nice peace was. As I savored the serenity, there was a knock at my door, followed by Eva entering with a newspaper in one hand. Delivering a newspaper and giving her morning, except it was already noon, report was part of her daily routine. I had told her she didn't need to bother with it, but someone as diligent as her would never neglect reporting to her boss. So she concisely informed me on the state of the capital. It appears the Empire is taking the divinarium's prophecy very seriously, she said. For starters, they're taking a rather forceful approach to gathering information. That doesn't sound good. There's been too much going on around here lately. Eva didn't say anything. Yes, I had made a number of mistakes, but if the Sword Saint hadn't given me that strange staff, the incident at ZM wouldn't have happened in the first place. Let's just ignore the fact that Eliza was the starting point of all this. If I pointed this out to her, she might stop bringing me relics, which would have made me sad. Besides, when she brought me so many items, there was nothing odd about a cursed item or two getting mixed in. After nearly a full day, Citri still hadn't come back. I figured she would have immediately noticed that the contents of the water bottle had been swapped out, so she must have been busy with some other matter. Generally speaking, I was the only member of Grieving souls with excess time on their hands. While I entered energy conservation mode, one of the busy people, Eva, said to me, "By the sound of it, the church has something major." I didn't do anything. Is that the truth? I didn't respond. Eva looked at me suspiciously. I guess she had already found out that I was the cause of the trouble over at the Academy of Magic. I didn't do it. I've done nothing. I had almost nothing to do with the church. About the only thing we had in common was that Ansem was a member of the church. There were several figures that were referred to as gods. Ansem's church revered the omnilusent god as the supreme deity. One of the most recognized deities in the world, they were the source of holy magic, which is to say, healing spells. The term cleric generally referred to people who worshipped this god and borrowed their power. Similarly, many hunters could be counted among the devout, including just about every paladin out there. In Obsidian Cross, a party where everyone had some form of healing capabilities, only their magus, Marietta, wasn't a devotee. Since the imperial capital was such an immense city, the Church of the Radiant Spirit had a large presence to match. But at the same time, the church tended not to interact too much with outsiders. You could join if you wanted, but they weren't proactive about recruiting. According to Ansem, this was because the omnilusent god's powers were finite. Something about how if the number of believers increased, then so would the people drawing upon the god's powers, which would reduce the power an individual could receive. Technically, that was supposed to be one of the church's most closely guarded secrets. It's a miserly world. Despite their passive approach to recruiting, the church had followers all around the world, a testament to the utility of the omnilusent god's powers. In fact, when I went to see Ansem once, they seemed to get the wrong idea and made a point of visibly scowling at me. I was Ansem's best friend. His best friend. And, Lucia's brother. I thought for a moment, wrinkles forming on my brow. Is it possible I did do something? I said. I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that, Eva replied. Does anything come to mind? No, nothing. But you could say the same about the thing with the Sword Saint and the thing with the Blackworld tree. Eva looked at me silently. Nope. I tried thinking, but nothing came up. Besides, since Ansem wasn't like Luke or Liz in that he didn't go dragging me around, I hadn't even come close to a church lately. I nodded to myself, satisfied with my own slothfulness. Well, Eva said with a small sigh, the Church of the Radiant Spirit does specialize in matters pertaining to curses. I believe they're even involved in the safeguarding of the imperial capital. I understand that Ansem's busy, but, I checked the clock, he should be here soon. It was about that time of day when my guard would change, and today Ansem would be on duty. To be fair, he was one of the most popular paladins within the church. In terms of admirers, he probably even surpassed Lucia. Remember, the church liked him so much that they granted him that relic armor. Perhaps he couldn't get away when so much buzz about that prophecy was causing so many headaches. Lately, I hadn't had many chances to chat with Ansem and was in the mood to talk with him. I think once he gets here, I'll just tell him there's nowhere I have to go today, so he doesn't need to bother. The newspaper talked about the attack on the Magic Academy, but said almost nothing regarding the cause. I guess Professor Sage was keeping the truth a secret. Noticing a line that said nobody had died in the incident, I let out a sigh of relief. Then the sounding stone on my desk began to vibrate. I felt like this thing was going off every day. I didn't want to answer it, but I didn't have much choice with Eva right there. Leaving it on the desk, I activated it. The stone went still, and a brief silence ensued. "I'll kill you," said a strained voice. "You've got the wrong man," I replied. "I'll kill you. I didn't tell you to stop the curses, then stir up something else. I told you not to cause any problems. A curse would be better than this." He sounded as if he were right in front of me. It hurt my ears. Good thing I had left the stone on the desk. He sounded like his voltage was pretty high, but I couldn't help him if he didn't tell me what had happened. "Despite it all, I am Lucia's brother, you know? I assume you're aware that at this very moment, chaos is breaking out at the Primus Institute over a certain potion. Franz, does your order deal with every bit of trouble that pops up in the capital?" I groaned internally. "And you keep coming to me over every little thing. Did you become one of my fans or something?" "I'll kill you," Franz said in a tense, rapid-fire voice. "There was a leak from one of the Institute's alchemists. We wouldn't have found out otherwise. It was your alchemist who brought the potion in. 13 knights were lost when the Third Order tried to quell the mayhem. A paralyzing gas instantly took them out. I'm not cleaning another one of your damn messes. Get over here right now. This goddamn time, you're going to listen to me." "I see. Oh, how do I put this?" I calmed myself with a deep breath, then hesitantly said, "But, the thing is, that potion is probably strawberry milk." "Heh. That potion our alchemist brought in." I wasn't sure what to say. I could even tell him the name of the manufacturer. It boggled my mind to think that strawberry milk was causing such a fuss. Going off of what Franz had said, Citri hadn't realized it was milk and brought it over to her old haunt. "Citri, try to pay attention. I don't want your nonsense. In front of the Academy of Magic. Now." "Hey, it's not nonsense." I put it in the metal bottle, and she took it away. "Chem." I heard the sound of something falling, then the sounding stone was silent. I looked up and saw Eva. She stared at me, her cheek twitching, her body trembling. They had it wrong. All wrong. For once, I wasn't at fault. If anything, I thought I deserved a pat on the back. If the fake stuff had caused so much uproar, who knows what might have happened if that was the actual potion? He said a curse would be better than this. Ha ha. Then let's make the next one a curse. Please stop it. What did these people want from me? All I did was throw away a potion and put some strawberry milk in a bottle. Yeah, aha. I had done something unnecessary. I had given in to the impulse to compare the two side by side. I didn't think Citri would barge in at that exact moment. But there was still time. If she realized this was all a misunderstanding, our oddball alchemist would surely calm down. Even if the potion really were something dangerous, all this madness struck me as a little unnecessary, but I thought it better to stay out of this mess. Proper people don't go to improper places. Sitting in my chair, I crossed my arms and gave Eva, who was still frozen, a hard-boiled smile. "Eva, the rest is in your hands." What's in my hands? Please, don't leave this to me. Oh, I've never heard Eva ask that. That's a rare drop. I heard heavy footfalls, followed by a pounding on the door. I gave a response, and the door opened. Ansem scrunched his shoulders and slipped in. Ah, Ansem. It's been a while. You took your time showing up. Apologies, said a voice muffled by a helmet visor. Oh, haven't heard him talk in a while. Another rare drop. Eva looked equally surprised. Ansem had always been a reticent man. He was also a very polite man. Ansem's stature far surpassed what was normal for people, but his increasing size was taken into account during the construction of the clanmaster's office. He couldn't fit into my personal quarters, but he'd just have to deal with that. If he wanted to enter, he would just have to shrink himself with his armor. With the calm but weighty movements of a large monster, he came up to my desk. As I understood it, harsh movements from him were liable to break things, which was why he made such slow and cautious movements. His presence was imposing as always. Though she had known him for a long time, even Eva shrank back before his towering form. I imagine the church has its hands full with the curse business, I said, leaning back in my chair. Despite being so busy, my old friend was kind enough to be with me. I hate to say this after you've come all this way, but I don't plan to go out today, so if you're busy, then you don't need to stay. Heck, I wouldn't go out there even if I had you with me. No. With that simple reply, he sat down on the floor. Even that was enough to shake the ground slightly. He didn't have a weapon or shield, but his fists were enough to take down most foes. He would probably be the last one standing in a Grieving Souls battle royal. If he entered the Supreme Warrior Festival, I wouldn't be surprised if he won. Make yourself at home. Ansem nodded, then became still. When he stopped moving, he looked less like a person and more like an art installation. Is he really relaxing? Well, if he's fine with it, then I'm fine with it. Eva seemed unsure of what to do with our unusual visitor. Her earlier bewilderment had entirely vanished, a result of Ansem's great character. He was powerful and gentle. The world would have been a much worse place if he were as confrontational as Luke and Liz were. Our world held together where it counted. I got up, took out a metal polishing spray and a mop, then went up to Ansem. I had just finished polishing my relics and had nothing else to do, so I could give him a polish. I sprayed his bulwark of a back, when he tilted his head my way. No. No need to be so reserved. No. Relic armor didn't get dirty easily, and polishing it didn't do much, but it was still better than no polishing at all. Once I started vigorously mopping his scratched armor, Ansem seemed to give in and became still again. By the time I had finished polishing every inch of his armor, the sun had begun to set, and my body groaned in pain. My collection was fairly large, but Ansem's armor was the only relic that I could get a workout just by maintaining, though to be precise, his armor wasn't part of my collection. Murin's Lament, huh? And it's a cursed item the church sealed off. Ansem grunted and nodded solemnly. It seemed there was truth in those rumors Eva had heard about the church having something big. Ansem didn't say much, but he wasn't at all averse to communication. As we chatted while I polished his armor, I had gotten a good grasp of the situation. It seemed the church was preparing to purify a cursed item in their possession, and Ansem was going to be part of the operation. The Omnilucent God granted more than just healing powers. They also enabled barriers and sealing. The Church of the Radiant Spirit in the imperial capital had for a long time possessed a number of hazards whose curses had been sealed off. The reasons for these seals varied. Some were sealed because the church didn't think they would be able to handle the curse and had no other options, and some were set aside because there was a good chance the curse would weaken with time. The one thing they had in common was that no seal would last forever. Cracks would form over time, and though it was rare, seals could sometimes break without warning, a fact that had been learned the hard way. After talks between the Empire and the heads of the church, it was decided that one of the most powerful items they had sealed away, Murin's Lament, was to be purified. As they saw it, rather than risk the seal breaking unexpectedly and wreaking havoc, it would be better to undo the seal and purify it while taking all possible caution. A sort of reverse approach. It sounded like the seal was about ready to be renewed anyway, but the church was taking the decisive route. Is that gonna work? I asked. Purifying curses was great and all, but I just hoped the church didn't forget that Ansem was a member of our party. He was tough and mellow, but that didn't mean he didn't feel anything. Should I lend a hand? I offered in a hard-boiled voice before I knew what I was doing. No. He shot me down. Even though Luke or Liz would have gladly accepted. But that was just fine. I was sure Ansem would be A-okay. If he needed someone, he could bring Ark or Sven, or maybe Lucia. The church might not be too thrilled to accept help from outsiders, but safety first. By the way, what sort of item is Murrin's lament? Ansem didn't respond. My collection had a number of relics that seemed like they might be useful during a purification, but I thought it would be better to stay out. We were dealing with a curse that was being purified because if it happened to break out, it might destroy the imperial capital. Sealing was a method generally saved for curses too strong to handle in any other way. The Church of the Radiant Spirit was one of the best when it came to purifications, so the scent of danger was thick in the air. If I screwed something up here, I might never recover from it. Though with all the trouble I constantly caused Ansem, I wanted to help him somehow. Ansem then nodded his head and said in one breath, Murrin's lament is a high-ranked cursed item that the church has kept sealed off for a long time. Using the spirit of Murrin, a woman who met an early death, a dark magus created a hexen weapon. This has long been a source of headaches for the church, so much so that it immediately came to mind when we heard about the prophecy. We were all too happy to accept the Empire's suggestion. With the support of the Empire, there's no better opportunity to conduct the purification. You have no reason to worry, Krai. I see. Sounds wild. Nothing like finding out the nearby church was holding on to something that dangerous to make you rethink living in a big city. How much damage has that weapon caused? I asked. Ansem simply grunted. And wait, that's definitely what the Divinarium's prophecy is about, isn't it? They said it was something that might destroy the Empire or whatever. There can't be any curses stronger than this, can there? How terrifying was this thing if it immediately came to mind when there was a prophecy about the Empire's destruction? Scary. I would have been tempted to run away if it were possible, but I couldn't leave Ansem behind. After a brief silence, Ansem slowly shook his head, then held up 2 fingers. It's number 2, I guess. I believe there's one greater. Good thing I didn't become a paladin. Okay, maybe couldn't was more accurate. Let's look on the bright side, I said. Let's be glad it's not number 1. I made an effort to put on a smile and patted Ansem on the shoulder, to which he sighed deeply and nodded. Then the door flew open, and Citri came in. It was immediately clear she had been through some rough ordeal. Stumbling into the room, her hair and clothes were disheveled, and I couldn't tell what had happened, but her right hand was pressed against her left arm. Krai, she said in a pouty, needy voice. Oh, and Antsy. Seeing her brother, Citri's frail expression stiffened. What's the matter? I asked. Nothing. Correcting herself, she stood up straight and cleared her throat. She removed her hand from her arm and brushed off her robe. Embarrassed, she was red to her ears. Well, that she was hearty and hale was what mattered. As far as I could tell, she wasn't injured, and she seemed fine in the head. I mean, even if she wasn't, Ansem could have fixed her as long as she was still alive. But why had she been pretending to be hurt in the first place? While glancing at her brother, she approached me, looking up at me with eyes meant to inspire guilt. Because of your conniving, the Primus Institute has been shut down for the time being. Most of the top-level staff have been arrested. My credibility has been shredded. The only thing left for me is to be your WI by your side. For the time being. Oh, okay. I wasn't conniving or anything, and while it sounded like something crazy had happened, I got the distinct impression the capital was a safer place now. It must have been hell, and I was sorry her credibility was gone, but she didn't look that put out. I know I said it's good to find fun in everything, but I thought this was going a bit far. Despite his sister's predicament, Ansem showed no particular reaction. Both Liz and Citri had strong personalities, and after having spent so much time around them, Ansem had become a very tolerant person. His willingness to indulge his sisters was both a strength and a weakness for him. Embarrassment at Ansem seeing her performance had certainly subdued Citri. Normally, she would have given in to her excitement and thrown her arms around me. Instead, she looked at her brother with a conflicted expression. Then, blinking, she removed a small box from her pocket. Inside was an old pendant in the shape of a cross attached to a metal chain. A large crimson gem was set in the center of the cross. It was a bit blemished, but probably still worth a considerable sum. I accepted the pendant and held it up to the light. It didn't seem like it was a relic. I carefully looked over the deep red gem, where I noticed some odd writing had been etched into it. Before he was caught, Nikolov slipped that into my hands. He said it was a talisman with a long and reputable history. He said that if you keep it close to you, you'll be protected by a heroic spirit. I see. Protection from a heroic spirit, you say? Sounds like it would be perfect for Ansem's current situation. Except Citri's mentor hadn't been protected, he had ended up arrested. Would this thing really work? Well, crosses were a holy symbol that those in the church liked to carry with them. Since Ansem was about to be part of a purification, it almost felt like this thing had made its way here just for his sake. It was probably better than nothing. Did fate cause all that mayhem just so this would happen? What a headache. He said after a long pause. With a chain of my own, I adjusted the length of the pendant, then placed it around Ansem's neck. He made a low, rumbling groan. An ominous air hung over the imperial capital. Merchants not based in the city were leaving like rats fleeing a sinking ship, those who couldn't were battening down the hatches. The Explorers Association received at least 2 or 3 times their usual number of protection requests. The public hadn't been informed of the astral divinarium's prophecy, but they could still tell something was up. So much had happened in succession. There was the Sword Saint's apprentice, who had gone on a rampage with the Devil Sword, that fiend that had appeared at the Zabrudia Academy of Magic, and then the alchemists at the Primus Institute fighting over that potion. Any one of those would have been a major incident, but since they had all happened so close to one another, only the densest people hadn't grown suspicious. Franz's team had tried issuing gag orders, but word of mouth wasn't so easily silenced. After constantly being flooded with questions from nobles and merchants he was acquainted with, Franz was beginning to reach his limit. What the hell does that man plan to do next? I can't understand it. He had finally established a task force for dealing with Nine-tailed Shadow Fox and was ready to get to work when this prophecy suddenly appeared. The continuing series of incidents and the prophecy that nonetheless persisted were both beyond Franz's comprehension. Though perhaps it would be unfair to assume that someone else could have handled this situation any better. Things were happening too rapidly, and connections were only revealed upon closer examination. They were cooperating with the other night orders, but still didn't have enough hands. There wasn't much they could do when a new incident popped up while they were still investigating the previous one. Then there was the incident at the Primus Institute, the worst one so far. Strawberry milk. Does he think we're fooling around here? It was something right out of a nightmare. The seasoned practitioners of the capital's greatest alchemical institution had all been tricked. That they had all lost their minds over a bottle of strawberry milk was an embarrassment history certainly would not forget. Every alchemist involved in the fighting had been arrested. Even if there was truth to their claims that they had been deceived, that didn't change the fact that that potion was an illegal substance. On top of this, they couldn't punish the 1,000 tricks for his involvement. They could perhaps charge him with fraud, but Franz was concerned that that man might say something to the effect of, if what I did was fraud, then I'll just give you the real thing. Even if the chances of that were slim, he didn't want to risk it. Franz had indeed told that man to stop with the curses, but that wasn't a suggestion to cause other forms of mayhem. It didn't help that he probably did this while fully cognizant of what Franz had meant. But Captain, another knight said when they heard his expletive muttering, if the prophecy remains despite multiple disasters having occurred and been resolved, does that mean it's indicating something even more lethal? Personally, I hadn't even imagined that the Sword Saint was holding on to something so deadly. With so many relics and people, it was only natural that the imperial capital had a plethora of dangerous items. Magi and alchemists were both prone to keeping secrets, and even nobles found themselves owners of all sorts of objects. The vault in the imperial castle was no exception. A check of its contents was bound to reveal something or another. The items exposed by the 1,000 tricks were likely just the tip of the iceberg. The outlawed thrall potion, Strawberry Blaze, had turned out to be a fake. According to their investigations, Citri claimed they had obtained it at the Magic Academy, but Franz wouldn't have been surprised if she were secretly holding on to the real potion. Right after the appearance of the prophecy, Franz had dispatched knights to scour the capital for dangerous items, but they hadn't uncovered much. They had also looked into the Sword Saint, the Zebrudia Academy of Magic, and the Primus Institute. Nothing had come up. The knights had authority, but not the sort that would allow them to mandate a search without proper evidence. If they lacked manpower, they also had obstacles in their way. The most they were able to do was conduct interviews. Meanwhile, the 1,000 tricks was getting info through means off-limits to them. More often than not, curses required specific circumstances to activate. Many people who possessed cursed items were unaware of it. In this case, the Sword Saint hadn't realized the danger that staff posed. It wasn't clear how the 1,000 tricks had learned that thing was cursed when not even its owner knew it, but he had taken his usual helter-skelter approach once he had obtained it. Could it be that the 1,000 tricks was trying to ascertain the subject of the prophecy? Was he applying his preterhuman artifice to root out each likely candidate? With a grunt, Franz shook his head, wiping this terrifying thought from the back of his mind. The Franz of the past no doubt would have ordered that the 1,000 tricks be questioned. But things were different now. In the past few months, Franz had endured all sorts of trouble through interacting with that man. He had already ordered Hugh to deal with him and had no further resources to spare on him. The 1,000 tricks would just shake him off, so Franz wouldn't bother. "We're going to direct some of our men to the church," Franz said in a low voice. "On the off chance the cursed item runs rampant, the damage might be far greater than it might even extend to civilians." Murrin's Lament was one of the most terrifying cursed items of which they were aware. Created through a vile rite carried out by a magus of ancient times, Murrin's Lament had killed people across the land, eventually taking the life of its creator. It was most likely what the Divinarium's prophecy was referring to. However, Murrin's Lament had unleashed its wrath a long time ago. Being spawned by powerful emotions, curses tended to weaken with time, and the church's barrier and purification techniques had improved over the years. What's more, apparently, the church had already been making preparations to purify Murrin's Lament. This operation had simply required them to move the date forward a bit. Now, with the full cooperation of the Empire, failure was inconceivable. "We've enlisted the aid of the necessary organizations," a knight reported. "We've also been in contact with Ark Rodin, and the Immutable will be there as well. We're ready for anything." The Immutable was the best paladin in the imperial capital. He didn't come from a noble family, nor had he attended a knight academy, yet he had been deemed worthy of a special offer to become a knight. His exceptional skills in combat and healing had made him as highly regarded as Ark Rodin. On top of that, he was also a member of Grieving Souls. Come to think of it, Ark Rodin is also a member of First Steps. How does that man make his friends? Franz wondered aloud. Perhaps he had good luck in this regard, perhaps everyone who got involved with him grew from his trials. It didn't matter to Franz. It didn't change the options available to him. If it was for the glory of the Empire, he would have to endure whatever came his way. And so the day of the operation arrived. With the purification approaching, traffic on the road to the church was being restricted. Though the operation was being kept a secret from the general public, all the personnel coming and going from the church caused people passing to direct concerned glances at the knights on duty. Though it was a distant second place, the Zebrudia branch of the Church of the Radiant Spirit was the second largest building in the capital, beaten only by the imperial castle. It was clear even from a distance. Unlike the imperial castle, which was an embodiment of utilitarianism, the countless white spires stabbing upwards and the solar emblem of the church showed aesthetic refinement that made it pleasant to look at. "You know, it's been a bit since I was last here," I said. Ansem grunted, plodding along next to me. The church probably didn't have a paladin more famous than Ansem. It was in part because of his high level, his healing skills, his affability, and, of course, his massive stature. Unlike his sisters, his reputation was absolutely spotless. He didn't go on rampages like Liz, and he didn't occasionally break down like Citri. With such stability, he really deserved the title of immutable. When he was nearby, absolutely nobody paid me any attention, something I was totally grateful for. It's like what they say about shelter: if you're gonna hide under a tree, make it a big one. Looking around, it seemed the scale of this operation was as large as Ansem had said. On the road to the church, I saw not only priests and knights, but hunters as well. In the case of the Sword Saint and the Magic Academy, the trouble had occurred abruptly, but with such sound preparations, we were ready for just about anything. And most of all, I'm here. I let out a sigh of relief and knocked a hand on Ansem's pillar-like legs. This time, I'll do what I can, except that's not really anything. After a pause, he let out a slow grunt. Normally, I'd never get close to something like a curse purification, but this time was special. Ansem was here, and I had learned from experience. For my simple and silent best friend, I was willing to lend a hand. Perhaps if I were present at the scene, nobody was likely to complain, no matter what happened. Preparations were underway in the church's courtyard, a large space paved with stone. When Ansem and I entered, the clergy, clad in their austere robes, began to excitedly murmur among each other while casting favorable glances at Ansem. Then their stoic expressions returned when they saw me in his shadow. Ansem was a source of pride for the imperial capital's church. I, meanwhile, was his unremarkable friend whom he kept around for some reason. When you also factor in all the messes I was constantly making for Ansem, it was no wonder these people didn't look at me fondly. Given my friendship with Ansem, none of the people were going to openly criticize me, but that still just meant I was using him for cover. The air in the courtyard was oddly serene. A large magic circle was drawn on the ground, probably for deploying barriers. With rituals like these, the bigger the scope, the more attention that needed to be put into preparation. Back when I still accompanied my friends on hunts, I learned this through the many times I watched Ansem set up barriers. All the formidable faces enlisted for the purification had already gathered in the courtyard. I recognized a few of them. I tapped Ansem's knee and said, "You don't need to worry about keeping me safe. I'm going to wander around, so you can go if you have somewhere you need to be." After a delay, he grunted. Ansem wasn't great at self-advocacy, and as his old friend, I could generally tell what he was thinking. I didn't think I'd be running into any danger in a church, of all places, and I didn't want to get in the way of his work. With heavy footfalls, Ansem walked off towards the center of the courtyard. I raised my arms and took a deep breath. Something about this place made me feel like my soul was being cleansed just by standing around. Acting a bit like a tourist, I watched the preparations continue when I suddenly heard a deep voice. "Krai, what are you doing here?" I flinched. "Chem." Turning in the direction of the voice, I saw the famous manager of the Imperial Capital branch of the Explorers Association, Gark Welter. All we needed was Luke and it would be perfect. I ran into Gark at the Supreme Warrior Festival, but it had been much longer since I last saw Ark. Not far behind him was the rest of Ark Brave. Ark looked at me with wide eyes. Though the rest of his party were giving me dirty looks, Ark displayed magnanimity that showed he was worthy of the title hero. Let's just ignore the fact that he was never around when I needed him. Meeting Ark on a day like today felt like a sign of good luck. I was feeling safer by the moment. "I'm so glad you could all make it," I said. Gark's eyebrow twitched. I hadn't done anything yet, so I hoped he didn't expect me to grovel. Normally, I'd never get anywhere near something so dangerous, but I was here purely to watch Ansem at work. I didn't know why, but Gark looked awfully tense. That was when something occurred to me. I'm always coming at your beck and call, I said with a clap of my hands, but this time I showed up before you even had to ask. Gark recoiled. Is this what they call preterhuman artifice? I gave Gark a hard-boiled smile. Cheek twitching, he got right up in my face. I instinctively took a step back. Krai, he said in a low voice, what are you planning to do this time? Don't get me wrong, I'm just here to watch Ansem do his job. Generally speaking, I never did anything. Sure, you could say not doing anything was wrong in its own way, and you'd have me there, but this time, I really hadn't done anything wrong. I stood up straight, and Gark placed a hand on my shoulder. Krai, I don't want any nonsense, he said. His tone was admonishing, but he had a murderous look in his eyes. I'm asking you what you plan to do this time. Do you understand me? What we're dealing with this time, really, this isn't the first time, is a true nightmare. This is a curse, something that plays by different rules. You realize that this is something so strong, the church asked the association for help, right? They even pulled some strings to get Ark to come back. And this isn't just any curse, it's a weaponized one. 13 priests gave their lives to seal this thing off. I wouldn't mind knowing how you managed to get Ark over here. If possible, I would have liked a sounding stone to contact him directly. But I guess Isabella or someone else from his party would have stopped me if I tried. And sealing this off cost 13 lives? I didn't know that. Branch manager Gark silently stared me down. I guess he was watching his voice since we were in a church. Just as I was giving in to the pressure and considering groveling, Ark interjected. Now, sir, I'm sure Krai has his own reasons. And you can never have too many high-level hunters. You should know that I, too, have only dealt with curses a number of times. Right, Krai? Right, Ark. This is it. This is Ark. Welcome back, Ark. As always, handsome inside and out. A mindless smile formed on my face before I could help it, eliciting sighs from the rest of Ark Brave. For all he puts up with, Ark continues to indulge this guy. Hold on, I protested, there's been a lot of trouble because Ark hasn't been around. There was Arnold, the time the Emperor needed an escort, Fox, the Supreme Warrior Festival, and I ended up dealing with all of it. Oh really? Ark said with a pained smile. Sounds like a lot. Looking back, I realized how often I found myself looking for him. But he wasn't around and that was that. It's not like there would be any point in saying he was around if he wasn't. With both Ark and Ansem present, this operation was practically guaranteed to succeed. But that was the exact sort of circumstance that spawned complacency, so I thought I'd play devil's advocate just a bit. We might have an abundance of power on our side, I said, patting Ark on the shoulder, but from what I can tell, this is a real beast we're purifying here. Don't let your guard down. Hearing my encouragement, Ark's usual bright demeanor stiffened up. Gark's eyebrows twitched spasmodically, and the local crime syndicate stared at me, the blood drained from their faces. Isabella, you, and the rest of Ark's party looked similar. It was just a light warning, but they were showing such exaggerated reactions. I didn't know what to do. An uncomfortable silence overtook us. Gark tried to break the tension with slow, forceful words. This operation has been planned out in minute detail. The curse has weakened while it's been sealed off, and we're moving under the assumption it's a powerful one. Not to mention the priests of today are also much greater than those of the past. That's perfect. There's almost no way this can go wrong. A bit more devil's advocacy and we'll be even more perfect. But the world's full of surprises, I said. I was met with silence. I took a brief break from the hard-boiled life and tried to cover myself. Ha ha ha, I am kidding. Just making a joke. The powerful looks I was getting forced me to surrender. I might have been used to receiving hostility, and Gark was one thing, but I couldn't endure it from Ark. Gark opened his mouth and was about to take a step towards me, but stopped when we heard a baffled shout. Brother, why are you here? Oh, don't tell me. Are you going to be part of this? Hey there. I turned and saw Lucia entering the church. She jogged up to us, her gaze growing suspicious as she got close, her overall expression just as grave as Ark and the branch managers. I hadn't realized she was going to be here. This is an aside, but Lucia only called me brother when she was flustered. With her rebellious phase, she was reluctant to call me brother and opted to call me leader as much as she could. But sometimes she would fall into old habits. Now, I take it something's got you panicking? Behind Lucia was a small crowd of faces I recognized. It was the members of Starlight, as well as some other magi from First Steps. With graceful movements, the leader of Starlight, Lapis, stepped forward, her handsome brow furrowed. HMPH. If the 1,000 tricks is coming to the forefront, should I assume this is no benign curse we're dealing with? Human weakling. I've heard all about what you've been up to, sir. Damn it, the Supreme Warrior Festival just ended, yet I hear you're already causing all sorts of shit. The moment I entered her vision, Chris started going at me. In a diversion from the norm, she was accompanied by the other members of her party, and they were all giving her exasperated looks. I felt like it was my lucky day, getting to see so many pretty noble spirits gathered in one place. The only ones I was really acquainted with were Chris and Lapis. It's not often you guys help with jobs like this, I said. Noble spirits all tended to live by their own rules. They weren't concerned with authority and weren't bound by the same restraints as humans. Lapis flared her nostrils when she heard my remark. I envied her ability to make even the most casual movements picturesque. Curses are our domain, she said. The curses of humans are child's play compared to ours. When Lucia asked for our assistance, I could hardly deny her. Come on, human weakling, don't tell me you don't know the legend of the cursed Crimson Spirit Stone. My instructor asked for my help, Lucia added. She's got her hands more than full dealing with the aftermath of the Blackworld tree, so I ended up here. I certainly didn't expect to run into you here. I see. Lucia dragged them along. Lapis and her party were being awfully agreeable. Not that they were ever bad people, but I was willing to bet that showing their skills to the church would help them fit into human society. Ah, the legend of the Spirit Stone, the cursed one. Yeah, that. Yeah. If you don't know, don't try to protect your weird sense of pride, sir. You know, there are some things we're better off not knowing. In a melancholic voice, Lapis blew away our dumb little exchange. To regain the Spirit Stone is something we've yearned for many seasons. It's one of the reasons we left the forest. We thought it possible this uproar over a curse might be related to our search, but it appears not. The Spirit Stone is not something that can be sealed away by human hands. It occurred to me that Eliza had once mentioned that her wanderings were in part because she was searching for something. Perhaps she was also looking for the Spirit Stone. Lucia cleared her throat. It seemed she had calmed down a bit. The point is, leader, please do not interfere. Well, yeah, you don't need to tell me that. And I don't recall ever trying to interfere. I noted the resplendent cast we had for this operation. You could tell the church was determined not to fail. And just as this thought crossed my mind, I heard yet another baffled shout. Krai Andrey? What are you doing here? I didn't ask you to be here. Followed by a large group of knights and attracting stares from the clergy was a man with whom I had found myself involved a lot lately. He looked like he had seen a ghost. The knights behind him wore polished, unified armor, which had a sense of orderliness different from the pure style of the church. Ah, Franz. You who? Oops. I accidentally called out to him with the casual manner I used over the sounding stone. Franz marched right up to me, grabbed my collar, and began shaking me back and forth. And what could explain yet another appearance by you? What the hell is happening? Any guesses? Is the prophecy referring to a curse? Spit it out already. My eyes felt like they might start spinning. Shaking attacks were one of the few dangers safety rings didn't protect against. I guess he didn't care for the yoo-hoo if he was reacting so strongly to it. He told me to come, now he was griping that I was here. What did these people think I was? For some reason, nobody came to save me from Franz's jostling. I didn't expect much from Ark, but even Lucia and Chris, people who helped me fairly often, were just looking at me with exasperation. Oh, I don't feel good. I feel faint. Captain Franz, the conference is about to begin. TSK, Thousand Tricks, will have a long talk later about this, and the Devil Sword, and the Academy. When he let me go, I stumbled and nearly fell, but stayed upright by grabbing onto Lucia's outthrust staff. All this when I had just come here to do a little spectating. Does Franz have something against me? You brought it on yourself. Sir. I'm pretty sure you're responsible for the majority of his grey hairs. I wasn't sure what to say. The noble not Weakling prodded my shoulder, while Lucia looked at me accusingly. I'll have you know I'm Lucia's brother, and Ansem's best friend, and both Liz's and Luke's best friend. You know, maybe it's only natural that I draw so much attention. Now, we're going to, Gark said, scratching his head. The church is leading this operation. Take Krai, I said. You're coming with us. I had a few thoughts of my own regarding that, considering everyone had just been asking why I was here. But I didn't see what other options I had. If I didn't go to the meeting, I could be in danger should anything happen. Fine, but I'm not gonna say anything. Just come on. The church in the imperial capital had been rebuilt to accommodate Ansem's size. The hall being used for a conference room had a ceiling high enough for him to easily fit in and came with a special seat just for him. It was proof that his strength and accomplishments hadn't gone unnoticed. It didn't relate to his work as a hunter, so I didn't know much about it, but apparently, he had done some excellent work in an incident involving someone connected to the upper echelons of the church. Ansem didn't talk about himself much, so when I saw what a name he was making for himself, I became proud, relieved, and encouraged to try my best. Except I wouldn't do that last one. The conference quietly began. I got the impression that the plan to purify Murrin's lament was a logical one based on hard numbers. Curses were born from strong feelings. The power of a curse could be influenced by circumstance and the caster's capabilities, which made them liable to defy expectations. That power was also known to degrade with time. The Church of the Radiant Spirit sealing techniques were developed with the intention of purifying a curse once it had been weakened. Their plan involved gauging the strength of Murrin's lament based on the destruction it had caused in the past, consulting the records of numerous other curses to estimate Murrin's current power, and finally hitting it with a force stronger than that estimation. By all counts, they had gathered more than sufficient firepower to overwhelm Murrin if it remained in peak condition. There was a detailed explanation of the techniques involved, which all went over my head, but I wasn't going to complain about that. I had my doubts when I first heard that the church planned to release a curse and purify it in response to the prophecy, but now I understood why the Empire was so willing to permit it. When you added Ark, Lucia, the members of Starlight, and more, failure seemed impossible. Heck, I wasn't sure you could get a better team if you tried. You could call Luke, but curses probably weren't something that could be cut. Once the basics had been explained, the old priest at the head of the table got up and began to speak. His name was Edgar, and he supervised the churches in the imperial capital and had done a lot for Ansem. His gaze was placid like the surface of a morning shore. He had the face of someone who couldn't harm a fly, but I was told he had once been a capable paladin. We've gathered here the best the imperial capital has to offer, he said. With the aid of knights, the Explorers Association, Magi of the Zebrudia Academy of Magic, and more, I believe it's quite unlikely that the purification might fail. Does anyone have any reservations? His voice had that aloofness you saw in people who worked in ecclesiastical roles. He sort of reminded me of Sora, the Holy Fox Maiden, but it was hard to picture this guy being incompetent. He wasn't like that phony oracle. I nodded along without really thinking, when suddenly, Franz rose from his seat along the left wall. All eyes gathered on him. We understand how this will play out, he said in a voice that carried well. However, I'd like to request an extra layer of precaution just in case. Extra personnel, or perhaps preparations to reseal the curse should the purification fail. We've secured a force that exceeds even the curse's highest estimated strength, Edgar said with a grimace. Is there something that has you uncertain? Edgar looked at Franz through narrowed eyes. The other priests became restless, caught off guard by Franz's request. It was hard to imagine many people besides Franz being able to speak up in a room like this. I didn't understand it all, but I guess there was some hole in the plan. For some reason, Franz glared at me, a smile forming. It's a minor concern, but there's been no shortage of mayhem lately. It's in the best interests of Zebrudia that we have no further chaos. Barriers were used at places like the Supreme Warrior Festival's arena. They were a form of magic where the more potent the spell, the more time it took to ready. Utilizing multiple rare catalysts, several priests spent hours placing a barrier. It was intricate work where it was better to have a group with a decent average skill level, rather than just one exceptional caster. In this field, priests far exceeded hunters. Quietly moving their hands, the priests of the Church of the Radiant Spirit continued their work. They were utilizing a layered barrier magic circle, a new technique that enhanced efficacy through building a three-dimensional object, instead of the usual methods of drawing on a flat surface. The trade-off was that the construction required greater catalysts, more time, and higher technical skills, but this wasn't the time to fuss over things like that. I knew a lot about relics, but I wasn't nearly as familiar with curses. I found the Church's explanation incredibly fascinating. For instance, I hadn't known that curses could do more than just drive people mad, they could also form bodies of their own. The plan was simple. Murrin's lament would be unsealed in the layered magic circle. Once the curse had been weakened by the barriers and attacks from beyond the barriers, the priests would use a divine ritual to purify and erase the curse in its entirety. Forcing myself to look like I knew what was going on, I observed the ritual space and saw Franz's reinforcements arrive through the large gate. The new arrivals weren't your usual sword and shield knights. They donned silver armor and carried firearms, some big enough that they required both arms to carry. The guns were smaller than what the Wolf Knights in White Wolf's Den had, but their long, narrow barrels told me these things were cutting edge. There were 25 knights in total. The priests began to buzz when they saw the strange knights. Meanwhile, Franz glanced at me, giving me an almost villainous smile. Chimthin. That's an experimental unit. Those guns use talismanic silver bullets, can fire up to 50 rounds in the span of a second, and they don't come cheap. I thought the Primus Institute was throwing money down a hole when they developed these things, but I guess you never know what might be useful. With this, that curse is as good as dead, 1,000 tricks. Human weakling, I take it you did something to Franz while I wasn't looking? Sir. How inelegant. Humans are such barbarians. What the heck is the Empire doing, making silver bullet firing squads? Firearms weren't a very popular form of weapon. The reason for this was simple: phantoms and monsters generally couldn't be stopped by a few bullets. It was quicker for a mana material-enhanced hunter to hit them, and using gunpowder to fire a projectile was too slow for hunters and powerful monsters. Then, when you add in the possibility of running out of ammunition, it was little wonder why they weren't widespread. And if those bullets were silver, using these guns must have been stupidly expensive. Oddly confident, Franz signaled the knights to get in formation. Moving in perfect unison, the squad split in two and formed lines outside the magic circle. They were setting up a crossfire, the bloodthirsty maniacs. After repeated bouts of bickering, the conference had ended with Franz's opinion being accepted. It was in part because these guys were an official knight order, and also because Gark had offered his support for the idea. Considering the priests were supposed to be the central figures in this operation, I wasn't sure where Franz's gusto was coming from. All because our leader is always saying things he shouldn't, Lucia said with a sigh. Given what we're up against, I don't think we can be too careful, Ark replied. Yeah, you're right, Ark, I said. I folded my arms and nodded. My sense of safety was skyrocketing. It can't hurt to be cautious. I was met with silence. I really wished they would stop getting so weird every time I said something. The next moment, Ansem and several priests exited the church building and joined us. You could really see just how much Ansem stood out in a crowd. Just by walking, he shook the ground. Edgar headed straight to Franz, and a few priests placed a box in front of him. I took a step back, afraid that maybe the cursed item was inside, but that wasn't the case. We initially had no plans to use this, Edgar said with a stern finger held before his lips, but this is a relic that the church has been keeping in storage. This should alleviate some of your concerns, Captain Franz, he said as he opened the box. When I saw it, my eyes bulged and I let out a gasp. This is. Inside was a chain with a multi-hued luster. It was about as thick as my thumb, but long enough to fill up the box. The chain type was one of the most diverse categories of relics. I had a number of them in my collection. There were many things a chain type could do, but the timing meant this was almost certainly. It's known as Pillar of Light. It's a chain bound from light, and it works even on incorporeal entities. With its ability to bind any target, it's a special piece, even among our collection. Oh, not often you see a chain that actually binds stuff. That got me some looks. You see, a lot of chain relics were joke items. If anything, because there were so many kinds, practical ones were pretty uncommon. My hounding chain was a sad thing that, while it could chase and bind foes, anyone with a bit of strength could free themselves or break it. I guess that still placed it above a cat chain, which wouldn't even chase targets. Once I had permission, I touched the chain, then lifted it up. It had a lot of weight for something so thin. I was sure it was made of metal, but it felt smooth as silk. That alone made it clear this was something our technology couldn't replicate. Leader, have you figured something out? Lucia asked me. I wonder if I can negotiate through Ansem to buy this. No. It was quite a long chain. Holding it up, I could see the light through it. I knit my brow as I examined it. Though I might have appeared hard-boiled, I wasn't having a single productive thought. The chain's beauty was captivating. Its powers didn't seem particularly interesting, but that wasn't really how I decided a relic's value. I simply liked relics, and this chain was something not in my encyclopedia. Just how long is this thing? If we were in a private setting, I would have done something like grab one end and wrap it around Lucia, but I at least had the awareness to realize this wasn't the time for that. I wanted to look at it a bit more, but I reluctantly put it back and let out a sigh. Leave it to the world-spanning Church of the Radiant Spirit to have something so interesting. This looks good, I said. We've got enough strength. I'd say. Why was that a question? Lucia asked. We had several priests and first-rate hunters, an experimental unit that could rain silver bullets, and a relic chain. Our ranks were unbreakable. There's so little to make me uneasy, it's actually making me uneasy. Can you say something that isn't nonsense? Sir. Chris was only saying that because she didn't know the usual me. Protecting the Emperor was only a small chapter in the Krai Andrey casebook. Edgar nodded a few times, noting all the people looking at us. Now that we've been given the 1,000 Trix's approval, let us begin preparations. Ansem. Unless I was just imagining things, Ansem's grunt was deeper than usual. Now then, I'm gonna get to a safe spot and do a little spectating. HMPH. What a petty affair. I had my doubts, but I suppose it wouldn't turn up that easily. The leader of Starlight, Lapis Fulgor, was muttering discontentedly as she watched the ritual proceed. Hearing her, Chris looked on in fascination. But it's pretty interesting. Madam. You'd never see guns like those used on a curse in the forest. It's barbaric. They're up against a curse, in case you haven't forgotten. Though I suppose those things might work against one produced by a human. Even noble spirits generally knew of the Church of the Radiant Spirit. The magic they used was different from that of noble spirits, but the radiant spirit they worshipped very clearly was a powerful one. There were also situations in which the radiant spirit's powers were more useful than those of noble spirits. The spell they were preparing was unfamiliar to Chris and Lapis, but they had no doubts as to its function. It wasn't known how strong the malign energies of Murrin's lament were, but there was a degree of sense in the church's calculations. If Lapis and her kin were carrying this out, they would have taken a route that leaned into individual strength a bit more, but that was a matter of cultural differences. There was no need to interject over something so minor. Still, they had been disappointed when it came to their real objective. The prophecy had gotten their hopes up. Kris blinked as she intently watched the ritual go forward. Maybe it really isn't among humans, madam. It was definitely taken by a human. It yearns for human blood. That was over 1,000 years ago, madam. And it hasn't caused any harm recently. The legend of the cursed Crimson Spirit Stone was known even among humans. However, not many of them knew that it wasn't a legend, but something that really existed. This was because noble spirits weren't eager to talk about it and humans lived very short lives. Long ago, when a bond of friendship still existed between humankind and noble spirits, a large war broke out between the two. A forest was burned, the queen of the noble spirits was killed, and the proof of her stature, the Crimson Spirit Stone, was stolen. Extreme enmity turned that stone into something accursed. Now imbued with a curse by regal blood, the stone went from owner to owner. In its wake, it left a trail of human corpses that dwarfed the number of noble spirits that had been killed by mankind. Up to the present day, the stone continued to travel about. A noble spirit would never kill one of their own over a treasure. They knew the strength of will found in those who weren't far from death. This was exactly the sort of tragedy a covetous human would cause. As the years went by, the war between the humans and the nobles came to an end. It was hard to say the two races were now on good terms, but there were noble spirits descending to human settlements. But the stolen stone was still lost. The return of their gem was something all noble spirits yearned for. You think it would just disappear on its own? Lapis snorted at Kris's naive thinking. Our lives are long, as is our answer. The malign energies in that stone are like desire given form. A desire that would not be satiated. The grudge against those arsonists wouldn't fade even if thousands upon thousands of them were killed. To cleanse this ill will would require destruction or bargaining. Interference from the outside was impossible. Something like the purification being performed on Murrin's lament would never work. Chem. I imagine if it ended up in the church's hands, they would send it back to us. They know how dangerous it is. If it hadn't caused any harm recently, that was because a seal had most likely been placed on it. But the spirit stone wasn't something that could be kept at bay so easily. But, Kris said, we've all searched for years without finding it, so it's probably not just going to show up. What are you doing up there, sir? Kris's voice instantly shifted from serious to bewildered. Atop a large arch, the Thousand Tricks was sitting like an ornament, his legs dangling over the side. He looked down at Kris as she waved her arms at him. I thought I'd have a good view from here, he said casually. Quit screwing around, sir. Everyone's taking this seriously, and that should include you. No wonder Franz is always. That man. I doubt he knows anything about what's going on. That was a look of genuine confusion he wore when Kris brought up the spirit stone. It appeared even a level 8 hunter couldn't be good at everything. Honestly, why did Eliza the Vagabond find him so enjoyable to be around? Several people from the church entered carrying a box tightly secured by chains. That must be what they stored Murrin's lament in. They set the box in the center of the magic circle, not far from Lapis and her party. Seeing the humans grow tense, Lapis uncrossed her arms. It wasn't what she had hoped for, but she figured she may as well take this chance to observe a curse made by a human. There was a palpable tension in the courtyard. The magic circle on the ground was surrounded by knights, hunters, and priests. Despite these extensive preparations, they didn't display any hint of complacency. Though she had just been barking about this and that, Kris was back with the rest of her party, focusing on the circle. I watched all this from atop the gate, where I was perched on an ornament, my legs dangling over the side. I wore a hard-boiled smile. While I had asked Lucia to put me up here so I could have a literal bird's-eye view, It was also because this was the best place to be out of the way. Down there, a stray bullet might come my way, and I didn't want to potentially be a hindrance to the purification. The layered barrier magic circle consisted of a magic circle drawn on the ground surrounded by 13 pillars. As I understood it, those pillars added an extra dimension to the circle because they had magic words engraved into them. They were thick enough that I could barely wrap my arms around one, which made me think they wouldn't be easy to collapse. The gaps between them were big enough for Ansem to pass through, but from my vantage point, the circle still looked like a prison cell. What an elaborate ritual. Very good. Very good. Now that I think about it, I haven't been able to watch one of Ansem's or Ark's fights in a good while. At the father's command, the chain-wrapped box was placed in the center of the magic circle. I pulled out my smartphone and snapped a photo, then sent it to little sister Fox. Cursed items RN, I wrote. We will now commence the purification of Murin's lament. Remember to stick to the plan, everyone. The father suddenly looked up, making eye contact with me. I gave him a meaninglessly meaningful smile, then nodded, intending to convey my gratitude for all his efforts for Ansem. The father's eyes widened. Then the priests surrounding the pillars raised their arms in unison. Then I felt it, a wave of energy emitted from the center of the circle. The pillars became connected by a net of lightning, and a bizarre pattern floated in the air. Magic circles were a form of magic that utilized a form of writing, as it were. Under different circumstances, I would have found the otherworldly scenery captivating. Outside the circle, Ansem waited, still as a boulder. The seal hadn't been broken yet, but the box began to rumble, its chains rattling. It was an eerie sight, the way it moved, almost like it was writhing in pain. Ready arms. Hearing Franz's order, the knights raised their guns. Almost like a choir, the priests began chanting an incantation, and the hunters got into combat stances. It felt like all hell could break loose at any moment. The only one not bracing themselves was me. But I kept my smile on. The father raised a rod and shouted in a voice that carried, "Release the seal." Almost as if waiting for that moment, the chains sealing the box broke at once. The sanctified ambience of the church was gone in an instant. As the box opened, it was accompanied by a chilling scream, like the mournful wail of a dying woman. From my overhead perspective, I saw, or rather caught glimpses of, something drenched in blood. That same moment, the priests began reciting prayers. The box was enveloped in golden light, and flames reached the ceiling. A voiceless scream far greater than the first one shook the ground. The glow and heat of the purifying flames forced the knights and hunters to step back. The plan was for the purification to begin for real once the curse had been weakened by the circle, but I wasn't so sure this thing was getting any weaker. Just like they had said, the curse resembled a woman. I say resembled because her eyes, nose, face, hair, body, everything was cloaked in black and falling apart. It looked exactly how I expected a spirit of the dead would, but I had no idea if that was her normal form or if the flames had something to do with it. Maintaining her form despite the flames, the curse thrust her head out of the blaze. As though he had anticipated this, Ark directed his blade at her. Everything stopped for a moment. The clamor, the shaking, it all disappeared for a moment. I couldn't even hear the incantations. The blue bolt shot from the tip of Ark's sword pierced Murin's lament. The girl's mouth flew open. Her long arms flailed in pain, but were deflected by the lightning running between the pillars. We easily had the upper hand. At this rate, the purification would be complete before Ansem had to do anything. The carefully established barriers didn't look like they would break easily. It looked like a lot of us would be unnecessary. Chris was even grimacing and covering her ears. But that was when Franz shouted in a voice on par with the booming thunder. "Don't let your guard down, fire!" What a lunatic. At Franz's order, the knights all commenced firing. The courtyard was rocked by a violent cacophony of a different sort than that of Ark's lightning. Gunfire was something even hunters rarely heard. The guns produced by the Primus Institute unleashed a storm of bullets. Unleashing 50 rounds a second seemed to induce a fair bit of recoil, pushing the barrels away from their target. But accuracy didn't mean anything when you could rain bullets. I was agog at the muzzle flash and the very unknight-like fighting. Franz, however, looked like he was having a good time. Ha ha ha. How's this, 1,000 tricks? This is the might of the Knights of Zebrudia. No way you can call this that. It looked like they were at least doing the bare minimum and not shooting the pillars. The barrage of bullets tore through Murin's lament and the box she had emerged from. Her translucent, burning figure flew backwards. She was incorporeal, but as Franz had said, the bullets were still inflicting damage. Her charred face contorted in agony, her body no longer hidden by the flames. Contrary to my expectations, she looked like a child, a human one. I had heard that the source of Murin's lament was a girl named Murin, but I hadn't realized curses could take the form of what had spawned them. She looked frail at first glance, but that made it all the more terrifying to think she had eaten into the hearts of thousands of people and destroyed more than a few towns. Hey, isn't this a bit overkill? This is terrible, it's like we're picking on a weakling, I said to myself. Leader, that's a curse, my sister snapped as she glowered at me. She had yet to get a chance to help out. I guess fearsome hunters weren't so easily swayed. Nearby, Lapis knit her handsome brow as she and her party stood and watched. Not bad for something given form by humans. Something truly malignant must have occurred. It explains why the church put so much effort into their preparations. Madam. Lapis was no surprise, but if someone as gentle as Chris was reaching the same conclusion, then I began to feel like a moron for thinking this was just bullying. I recalled hearing that some phantoms could disguise themselves as weaklings and strike when you let your guard down. Perhaps you couldn't make it as a hunter if you let yourself be fooled by appearances. Oh, is it really that powerful? I said. Spare me the mockery. It's nothing compared to you, Lapis said with a frigid glare. Was that a compliment I just heard? Being slammed by fierce attacks, Murin was tossed around the circle and bounced off the barriers like a rubber ball. All the time spent bringing in the pillars and engraving them appeared to have paid off. I was beginning to think the chain wouldn't be necessary. It's weakening, Gark called, standing not far from the hunters. It's working. Just give it a bit more. The violent fervor of the knights and the priests meant Ark was the only hunter who had gotten a chance to do anything. We really did have more than enough firepower. Then I had an idea. If I tried playing devil's advocate here, maybe I could sully my reputation as a pre-human artificer. Man, I'm on fire today. Chem. I'm not so sure about that, I said. Would you cut that out? Sir. Hear me out, we might actually get to see something interesting. Ah, you human failure. Back when I was still trying to fulfill my role as party leader, I used to always try and put on airs in such a way. Needless to say, it was nothing more than a facade, as even back then, I wasn't capable of much. Murin clawed at her head and let out a sorrowful wail befitting her name. It was a conglomerate of every negative emotion. It was a scream without sound and without meaning, but the emotion, the murderous drive, was all too apparent. Even through the barrier, it was powerful enough to freeze my heart. Umbral flames erupted from her small body. They ate away at the golden flames, deflected the bolts, and incinerated the incoming bullets. Still, even a hexen weapon that had devoured countless lives was no match for the peak of the church's techniques. Encased in flames, Murin banged against the edge of the barrier, but she may as well have been hitting a wall. The pillars trembled and their bases were blackened, but the flames remained firmly in the bounds of the barrier. The priests said they had referenced records to estimate her power, and it looked like their calculations were spot on. The black flames began to gradually regress. The curse was weakening, just as the church had predicted. Between the barrier, the lightning, and the bullets, I didn't know what was doing the trick and what wasn't, but this was enough to kill a dragon. Perhaps deciding that Murin had been weakened enough, Edgar turned and said something to Ansem. This meant it was time for the purification. Even if it had been weakened, I was under the impression that eliminating a curse entirely was a pretty difficult thing. Especially when it came to something of a magnitude like Murin's lament, Even the Church of the Radiant Spirit had to use their best miracles. This told me I should be proud that Ansem had been selected to play a major role. Ansem nodded to the father, then stepped into the barrier. He was the first to do so since the attacks began. Ansem Smart, the Immutable, was considered to be the best paladin in the Imperial capital. Everyone besides me in Grieving Souls had some aspect in which they were second to none. In Ansem's case, that would probably be his immense resilience. His giant stature made him tougher than steel, he could heal and defend with the powers of the Radiant Spirit, and he had high mana material. No attack could faze him. He was the Immutable. That resilience naturally applied to physical attacks, but also to everything else, including magic attacks, environmental changes, poisons, paralyzers, other drugs, diseases, and even curses. Tempered by Citri's poisons, Lucia's spells, Luke's swords, Liz's selfishness, Eliza's free spirit, and my lightning, Ansem had every hazard covered. Even in the face of an extraordinarily dangerous curse, he stepped forward without fear or hesitation. When he boldly passed through the barrier, Murrin turned her wild eyes towards him. The umbral flames scorching her body assailed Ansem. Yet this manifestation of malice didn't so much as rattle him. He stepped forward, undeterred by the malign energies attacking his body, causing Murrin to retreat for the first time. She must have picked up on the immense power housed in his body. Did this hexen weapon, only capable of hurling anguish, retain the vestiges of a will? Unfortunately for her, the area of the circle wasn't so wide that she could escape Ansem. She quickly found her back against a wall. With nowhere to run, Murrin let out an exceptionally loud scream. Ansem began to extend his arm. All that was left was for the miracles of the Church to purify this pitiful weapon wrought from the vile nature of mankind. Or so we thought. Ansem's shoulders shook, and his arm came to a sudden halt. The priests all gasped and stared in shock. Noticing that the situation had changed, Franz lost the haughty attitude with which he had commanded his knights. Now his eyes were as wide as they could go. What? What in the world is, no, when did it get there? At some point, a strange figure had begun to writhe in the space between Ansem and Murrin. The figure was black. At first glance, it looked like a lump, but then it unfurled, stood up, and it became clear that it was a humanoid. It was a knight. It was the silhouette of a knight, every inch of it shrouded in black. It was an unsettling onyx that swallowed light, like a hole had opened up in the world. In the bright glow of the magic circle, they were impossible to overlook. Perhaps the most confused of all was the target of the purification, Murrin. What had been just a silhouette instantly gained texture and depth. In the blink of an eye, a mere shadow had become a direful black knight. The knight stood before Murrin's lament and drew a sword, almost as if to protect her. The blackening of the pillars accelerated. An unknown power? Edgar cried. Destroy it. Fire. Kill it. Having stopped for the purification, the gunfire resumed. Silver bullets lacerated the interior of the circle. The Church had accounted for all sorts of contingencies when planning out this operation. To name a few, they had considered what might happen if Murrin's lament was stronger than anticipated, or what to do if Ansem became incapacitated. However, you could hardly blame them for not considering the possibility of reinforcements manifesting. A curse that had been sealed away for years couldn't possibly have any allies, and, per Franz's request, there were knights on duty to prevent anyone from getting in from the outside. Ansem's titanic frame was like a wall. For anyone on the ground, it was probably hard to tell what was happening. But funnily enough, sitting atop the gate's ornament let me see the situation he was in. The father had called it an unknown power, but that wasn't right. I had seen it clearly. I couldn't help but rub my eyes. That night. It came from the pendant Citri gave us. Oh, is this a nightmare? The knight thrust his sword into the floor. Some sort of black liquid resembling blood fountained from the surface, forming a curtain. By some mysterious power, the bullets coming from both sides bounced off the erupting liquid. Franz's jaw hung open unflatteringly. Then Ansem let out a roar as he stepped forward, fist raised. It was the world's most primal form of spellcasting. Traditionally, magic was the use of mana to power prescribed steps that caused phenomena. The steps could involve sounds, writing, gesticulations, and breathing. However, a very small percentage of people could induce phenomena just by thinking. Those with the right aptitude could use this primitive magic. It was unique in its lack of classification, powerful because only certain people could use it, and impossible to control. Able to sometimes cause widespread damage independent of one's will, people fearfully deemed these curses, and those who willfully used them were called shamans, to distinguish them from magi. She was the fearsome enmity born from the research of one deplorable shaman. Fear, spite, envy, anger, agony, murderous intent. The strong emotions that produced curses were frequently negative ones. The shaman gathered anyone they could so long as they had the right aptitude, men and women, young and old, and gave them no choice but to kill one another. They were left in the dark with no other options for survival. Blood gave way to more blood, spite invited further spite, and murderous desires took shape. Then, when the last person standing, Murrin, reached the limits of her strength, a new, unprecedented hexen weapon was born. The desire to kill lost its target and its meaning, but the emotion persisted undiluted. She only wanted to kill, for that was her only reason for living. To her, the urge to kill was a given, just as much as drawing breath. He was the result of those who went to be saved. Following his liege, who had been driven from friends, family, and county, a loyal knight fell before he could complete his duty. He left behind a pendant, which soaked up his regret that he couldn't protect his liege to the end, and his hatred for those who reviled his liege as if he were a demon and tried to have him executed. All emotions but the desire to defend the weak were sheared away, instilling the cursed pendant with a protective nature. The innocence or guilt of those he protected was none of his concern. That the accusations directed at the knight's liege were true and credible, that his liege's silver tongue and cruel nature had killed hundreds of innocents, these facts were irrelevant. It didn't matter who, the knight only wished to protect the scorned. Emotions that formed curses were pure, but multifaceted. There were those he couldn't protect. There were those who wouldn't rely on him. Curses of different eras and different sentiments could mingle and give form to something new. What occurred here was something you could probably travel the world and not see again. The priests who had lifted the seal, the armored knights and hunters, all stared in astonishment at the two curses. Rotting limbs cloaked in black. A figure wrapped in rags and only barely managing to resemble a person. It began to writhe, then in a matter of seconds became something tangibly human. The murderous rage that had been cowering before the light regained her clarity. The knight, revitalized with something to protect, and the accursed spirit, now far more eager to kill, both faced the incoming attacks and unleashed their might. After appearing out of nowhere, the mysterious Black Knight drew a sword black as the void and cut down the incoming bullets while the curtain blocked the lightning bolts. Ansem swung his fist, but the Black Knight managed to block it with his blade, sending sparks in all directions accompanied by a high-pitched metallic ring. The pillars of the layered barrier magic circle continued to darken, cracks forming on their surfaces. It might have been powerful and cutting-edge, but it still had its limits. Hexen power was the term used to describe a curse's strength. The layered barrier magic circle had been built with the intention that it would be more than enough to handle Murrin's hexen power and keep her sealed off. But you could also view that as its upper limit. The church said they built the barrier to be somewhere between 150 to 180% of Murrin's highest estimated hexen power. Therefore, if the barrier wasn't holding, then this Black Knight must have been, at minimum, about as strong as Murrin. But what in the world is that? Is that also a curse? Ah, Godamnit, Citri. The situation had been instantly turned on its head. The priests directing a spell from outside the barrier were showing signs of fatigue. Increase the power, we can't let them escape, Edgar shouted. At the very least, we have to eliminate one. Kill them. They are the disaster from the prophecy. Edgar was keeping a calm air, but his expression was grave. But that was nothing compared to Franz, who was yelling savage orders with bloodshot eyes. He glanced at me just now. What for? The Black Knight's defenses were impenetrable. Holy light, bullets, he blocked it all with his body, not letting anything get past him to Murrin, who had changed considerably since his arrival. Previously, she had looked about 30% human, now it was closer to 70. The umbral flames had transformed into a jet-black dress, and her vague and decrepit face now had a clear visage, with eyes, nose, and a mouth. She no longer resembled a candle's final flickers. She had clearly gotten stronger. But if she was a curse that killed anything and everything, wasn't it strange that she wasn't going after the Black Knight? Then, the onyx flames emanating from Murrin's lament wrapped around the knight. His wretched form underwent another change. His armor glowed purple, and his left hand now held an immense black shield that looked like it could block anything that came his way. As if it had been nourished, his sword had grown in length and was now veiled in Stygian flames. These two were synergizing. Chris stamped her foot on the ground and shouted at me, "Human weakling, there's nothing interesting about this, sir." "See, calm down." I know. This is where it starts getting interesting. Brother, would you please quit playing around? Cut the games, 1,000 tricks. What is that thing? Chris, Lucia, and Franz all yelled at me, but I thought they were better off focusing on the purification. Did they really have to pin everything on me? Well, this one time, I actually was sort of at fault. Shit, I should have worn perfect vacation. I was afraid that if I stood up, I might fall and hurt myself, so I stayed seated as I cheered them on. Come on, Ansem. You can do it. A roar that would give a dragon a run for its money echoed throughout the ritual grounds. In rapid succession, Ansem swung his fists at the beautiful but disturbing sword and shield. It seemed his preceding punch had just been a way of testing the waters. His swings were rash, but they were enough to quite literally shake the ground. Everything trembled from the force of Ansem's iron fists. He was a big man, which made him naturally durable, but he was also powerful. Mana material enhanced a person as their heart desired, so they could remain slender while being freakishly strong, like Liz. But as we also saw with the former Supreme Warrior, muscular fortitude and strength were still intertwined. Mana material had made Ansem grow large while also giving him the strength of a mythological hero. Grieving souls fought regularly, but never did arm wrestling because when it came to pure strength, Ansem was simply unbeatable. With his superhuman build and might, his attacks didn't need holy power to be overwhelmingly destructive. Ansem could flatten a normal person, even if they were clad in armor. Faced with Ansem's fists, the Black Knight took evasive maneuvers for the first time. He ditched the shield Murrin had granted him and fell back. A fist rammed into the abandoned shield, bending it like a twig and sending it skyward. Murrin's lament shot flames at Ansem's feet, but they failed to hinder him. The magic circle was supposed to have been on the wider side, but it became quite cramped with an unrestrained Ansem Smart inside. He didn't carry a sword or shield today, but his arms had better reach than most weapons. The knight swung his sword as he fell back. While the sword traveled in a vertical arc, Ansem swung his fist. Though it had been bolstered, the knight's sword was still dwarfed by Ansem. Taking a hit to the flank, the knight lost his grip on the weapon, the blade stabbing into the ground. He stopped for a second, as if in a daze. Ansem seemed less like a paladin and more like some sort of beast. If anything here looked like a curse, it was him. Given how fond they were of my friend, I assumed the priests knew all about him, but their expressions were stiff as ice. Come on, Ansem. You can super do it. He followed up with another roar. His violent rampaging left no room for the knights or other hunters to lend a hand. It would be too easy to accidentally hit him. However, the one person accustomed to cooperating with Ansem, Lucia, wasn't afraid to go on the offensive. Hailstorm. From her hands emerged an ice-laden tornado, which grew in the blink of an eye and swallowed up the magic circle and Ansem with it. This sort of magic, advanced spells with wide areas of effect, was Lucia's specialty. They also excelled in visual appeal. I could recall excitedly telling her how cool this spell was when she first showed it to me. Doing things like flying on a broom had led to her being treated like a gimmick magus, but she was a proper spellcaster through and through. A scraping sound blended with the howling wind. Everyone looked at Lucia, aghast that she would cast a wide-scale annihilation spell over her friend. She cleared her throat. A spell like this is nothing to Ansem, she explained. A roaring silhouette moved about the ice storm. This was a spell that frequently turned monsters into ribbons, but he was used to this. Honestly, I felt he had the right to complain a bit. Is that really an organic creature? Sir. He's moving inside Lucia's spell, Chris said, her face twitching. I thought she was going a bit far with that, but I had to admit, I also struggled to believe Ansem had once been on the small side. Lapis narrowed her eyes, a troubled look on her face. But with this spell, nobody on the outside can offer any assistance. Look, human weakling, even Ark doesn't know what to do, sir, Chris added. It wasn't just Ark, Franz and his knights were equally befuddled. Because of the hailstorm, no ranged attacks could reach their target, not that anyone could get a clear shot anyway. Though anyone not used to fighting alongside Ansem wouldn't have been able to help out in the first place. Krai, use your brain, Gark shouted from the front of the hunters. I didn't know why this was directed at me. Yeah, about that, sorry about Lucia, I said. It's just, this is how we approach every fight. Lucia didn't say anything, but simply hung her head in embarrassment. The scale and duration of a spell generally depended on a magus's skill, and her hailstorm didn't look like it would be going away anytime soon. Just like there was no bringing back a fired bullet, most spells couldn't be undone once they were cast. Grieving souls ran on a you snooze, you lose mentality, which was what led to this. Lucia may have appeared level-headed, but she absolutely had muscles for brains. She wasn't as bad as Liz or Luke, but she was still more bloodthirsty than your average hunter. And you could say the same thing about Ansem. You couldn't become a high-level hunter without a strong sense of love for the battlefield. Ansem let out another thunderous roar. He followed up with more attacks, taking advantage of Murrin and the Black Knight's fear of the hailstorm. A black silhouette and a white silhouette mingled in the twister. I couldn't see much, but I could tell that Ansem was applying pressure. I assumed Murrin's screeching was just being drowned out by Ansem's roars. His habit of roaring during attacks was a habit he developed shortly after Grieving Souls started hunting. It was apparently his way of overcoming his timidity, but now that he was a giant, he just looked like he had gone berserk. Reaching the end of his endurance, the Black Knight was tossed from the hailstorm. Given the dents in the top half of his armor, I was pretty sure a human would have died long ago. He slammed into one of the pillars, which was now mostly blackened. Then. What? Lucia cried in a doltish voice. She probably felt the same way I did. Ah! It broke. The thick pillar fell over, and the layered barrier magic circle disappeared. The magic circle wasn't just there to keep the curse from escaping, it was there to weaken it. A section of the barrier vanished, causing the temperature to suddenly drop. I felt a foreboding chill down my spine. One of my safety rings activated out of nowhere. Everything was shaken by an ear-splitting wail. The blood drained from the faces of the knights and hunters. Some of them fell to their knees as if they had lost their strength. Murrin's lament got her name from her ability to cause destruction through her wails. That must have been what my safety ring had protected me from. The defensive utility of these rings was praised for good reason. Hailstorm wore off, causing the tornado to fade away, revealing Murrin. She had dark eyes and messy hair. Her form hadn't changed, but the aura around her had intensified. Her humanoid outline only made her that much more unsettling. I don't believe it. Edgar gulped. How can she still have so much power left? Unfettered, Murrin's lament stood on unsteady feet, then darted off. Roaring violently, feet cratering the ground, Ansem gave chase and took a swing at her. Murrin screamed as she just barely managed to evade the blow. She flew to the battered, unmoving knight and picked him up in her arms. Ansem was powerful, but one of his few flaws was his poor accuracy. The trade-off for taking more swings was that fewer of them found their target. He attacked what appeared to be, girl cradling the knight. With a paladin throwing boulder-like punches, the fearsome curse took advantage of her freedom to run away, screaming as she fled. The other people present seemed unaffected by the curse, which meant those were probably just plain old screams she was emitting. Gravely, Murrin quickly scanned the crowd surrounding her, then looked up at me, sitting atop the exit. Our eyes met. I shook my head on instinct, but she glided towards me. Carrying the knight, she ran through the air. There was absolutely nobody in front of the gate, yet she came to me atop the ornament. She didn't even hesitate. What are you coming over here for? This always happened. Nobody ever listened to me. Murrin let out a frantic wail. The sound alone was enough to freeze your soul, and the swarming priests trying to stop her all fainted. There was nothing I could do but smile. Good grief. I know I say this a lot, but this wouldn't happen if you people used safety rings. I crossed my arms and looked down at the encroaching curse. Time seemed to slow down, making a single second feel like 10 or 20. I didn't run or hide. I knew how these things worked. She'd chase me even if I tried to flee or take cover. Murrin's lament continued to sprint. Behind her, Ansem ran like a wild beast, attacks from Ark, Lucia, and Starlight closing in from all angles. I thought that I might be in hell. Not that there's anything I can do about it. Murrin's lament held out her hand, as if begging for help. With a hand thrust before me, I automatically held out my own. It was a terrible habit of mine. Then, Murrin's eyes widened and she came to an immediate halt. Frozen in midair, the chain pierced her from behind. She vaguely watched as the luminescent object burst from her chest. The chain came from all directions, puncturing Murrin and the knight she held in her arms. It was the chain that the father had prepared just in case, pillar of light. Looking at it in the box, it appeared deceptively long, which was apparently because it was actually multiple chains. I turned towards Edgar and saw him throwing the final chain. The links of light dug into the back of Murrin's head. Her mouth opened and closed, but made no sound. The air began to regain its cleansed ambience. Edgar heaved a sigh and wiped the sweat from his brow. Good heavens, I really had to use it. I know I didn't have much of a choice, but now that they're stuck in midair, setting up a magic circle won't be easy. All we can do is leave these two sealed there for now. Relieved to see that Murrin's lament had stopped, Ansem let out a groan of vexation. Leave it to a relic to restrain something not even the latest layered barrier magic circle could fully handle. I wondered what you were doing up there, but now I get it. I should have known. Way to go. Gark, evidently blind, praised me. While being pierced and restrained in midair, Murrin maintained her spiteful glare at me. Don't look at me like that. I didn't do anything wrong. Don't reach for me again, you scared me. A magic circle was being rapidly put together in the courtyard. Meanwhile, a conference was held in a room where they could keep an eye on Murrin's lament and the Black Knight, still in the air and threaded by the chain. In a state of alert, Edgar let out a deep sigh as he looked over the gathered faces. We're grasping at the thinnest straws here, he said. That was certainly not the sort of emergency we had accounted for. Who knows what might have happened had we not prepared the relic thanks to Sir Franz's suggestion. That wasn't the sort of thing anyone could have seen coming, Franz replied. Nothing we could have done. Isn't that right, 1,000 tricks? Yeah, While I was spacing out, Franz suddenly threw the ball my way, so I quickly nodded my head. I heard audible sighs from Ark, Chris, Lucia, Gark, and more. Who would have thought a knight would have emerged from that cross pendant? I was confident that I had seen a good range of things, but it seemed there was still a lot beyond the horizon. I'll just keep that to myself. Nobody saw what happened. Still, what are the humans of this land doing hiding so much dangerous shit? Franz silently directed a lethal glare at me. Looking at me like that won't help. Should I just start groveling? Nonetheless, said our good friend Ark, Murrin's lament is undoubtedly one of the strongest curses I've ever battled. I understand our role was to weaken the curse, but neither mine nor Lucia's advanced spells served to do anything more than hold off their advance. It seemed to have some effect on the night, but everything just passed through Murrin's lament, Gark said with a scowl. As a former hunter, there was a lot he knew about taking down phantoms and monsters. It didn't look like we were entirely ineffectual, but this is something different from a visitant monster. He was right. It was hard to think of many monsters that could take Ark's lightning and Lucia's hailstorm head-on and stay active. Ark's main role wasn't as a magus, but Lucia was capable of knocking a dragon out of the sky. I was pretty sure half the reason those pillars broke was because of her, even if everyone was pretending like it wasn't. Indeed, Edgar said. It would seem the esoteric techniques of the church are the only way to resolve this. They're immune to outside interference so long as they're bound by Pillar of Light. As to how we'll reattempt the purification, that's something we're yet to figure out. The layered barrier magic circle won't work if they're in midair, and 2 curses of that power gathered in one spot is something we've never seen before. I see. I guess this matches the Divinarium's prophecy. By the way, Franz, I can't help but notice the way you keep glancing in my direction. This didn't seem like a good time to speak up needlessly. We had a star-studded lineup, and sometimes it's best just to not say anything. I folded my arms and nodded without really knowing what I was agreeing with. That was when our thus far inactive members, Starlight, spoke up. I got the impression they had been waiting for this. Magic has little effect on curses. The best way to deal with them is with powers of a similar nature. In our forests, this role is given to nobles who spend years cultivating mental fortitude. They're shamans who wield a different sort of power than the rest of us. Sir. Those born to the right bloodlines developed the aptitude over many years, sir. Because her ire hasn't at all faded, taking on a curse of this magnitude through direct means won't be easy. The noble spirits all spoke up. Calling this bunch even somewhat obliging felt like an exaggeration, but they definitely came in handy at such times. They're messing with Chris, aren't they? She talks like that because she was told to be polite, but why is she the only one doing that weird sir thing? The father nodded deeply and looked up at Murrin with a vaguely pitying gaze. Her ire hasn't faded, huh? I guess there's nothing we can do about that. The origin of Murrin's lament is a tragic one. She, too, is a victim in a sense. I didn't know what had happened to Murrin, but I had trouble seeing it that way after all the mayhem she had caused. As I sank into a fake state of contemplation, Lapis narrowed her eyes and made a surprising suggestion. Purifying this will be a heavy burden for the hands of a human. Zebrudia has been kind to us. If necessary, as curses are our domain, we can call a shaman from our forest. Good heavens, a noble shaman? Gark looked in shock at Lapis and the father. For a time, Starlight had been one of the more problematic parties in the imperial capital, so perhaps that had spurred this decision of theirs. I didn't know them that well, but I thought they had become a little bit more agreeable since joining our clan. Come to think of it, Ketcha Chaka is a shaman. Wonder what he's up to these days. Is he still in Peregrine Lodge? However, the shamans of the forest despise humans, Lapis said. Bringing one all this way will require the cooperation of Zebrudia. And, from PH, I imagine the church has its image to maintain. I see. I will admit, if the layered barrier magic circle isn't sufficient, then I can't imagine the central church has anything that is. Realistically, Ansem's the only member of our branch who can purify Murrin. But under such conditions, the curse will likely escape. Ansem let out a troubled groan. If a curse that radiated hatred and homicidal impulses, and had been released from its shackles, would choose to flee, then I guess it really was possible to be too strong. I've received orders to make dealing with the prophecy my top priority, Franz said. I'll take responsibility for the procurement of whatever we need. If this is what it takes to stop the prophecy, I'll consider it a bargain. With so many capable people, we had the resources to deal with anything. I felt really out of place. With a haughty nod and a cold voice, Lapis said, "Noble spirits avoid metal as a general rule. The only exceptions are gold and silver. Prepare a carriage made only from flora and gemstones, and see to that it's pulled by unicorns or griffins. The shaman doesn't care for crowds of humans, so you must block off the main thoroughfare upon their arrival. Treat them as you would treat royalty. I was pretty sure we didn't go that far out of our way even for royalty. The fact that Lapis seemed to be speaking genuinely made it all the more troubling. Franz grimaced, probably at the thought of all the steps it would take to shut down the main thoroughfare. Are there no alternatives? He asked. What about that professor, Sage Cluster? She's a noble magus. HMPH. You must be joking, that woman's only half of a noble. And maybe I shouldn't expect a human to know this, but magi and shamans operate on different principles. Franz had his work cut out for him. But this time, I truly hadn't contributed to his woes. In fact, you might say that since Lucia, Ark, Ansem, and everyone in Starlight were all members of First Steps, I had done a lot to help. Yeah, I know. That same line of thinking is why my level is so high. Franz, the father, and Lapis all got to work making future plans. With nothing to do, I stared absent-mindedly out the window at Murrin's lament. Something bothering you, Krai? Gark asked me out of nowhere. Chem? Not really. I hadn't even said anything. Unless that was the problem. Everyone's gaze gradually turned my way. Lucia's unamused glare was particularly painful. Had it become clear I hadn't been paying any attention? Bothering me. Something is bothering me. No, nothing comes to mind. Then I had something. It didn't have anything to do with our current predicament, but it was bothering me. It was Liz. In my guard rotation, her turn would be next. I didn't see any point in having her protection, since I was running into all sorts of chaos anyway, but I didn't think she would listen to me if I told her not to show up. Not to mention, she knew that Luke and everyone else had gotten something, so she was assuming she would get something too. The truth was that all the things I had given my friends were nothing but trouble, but she wouldn't care about something like that. If I didn't give her something, she would absolutely cause a fuss. Oh, what am I going to do about that? If there's something, now's the time to say it, Gark warned, cutting off my unrelated thoughts. Yeah, I don't think there's really anything. It doesn't matter how minor, Franz said needlessly. Every time you say this, then go off and do something. What had I done to warrant such a low opinion? I got the feeling this wouldn't be settled unless I said something. I cleared my throat and said apologetically, it doesn't have anything to do with the subject at hand, but right. I'd really like a treasure chest or some other kind of locked object. What are you babbling about? The important thing is that it's locked. An old, wooden, treasure chest that's pleasing to the eye. Liz, you see, loved locked treasure chests. The more complex the lock, the better. The closer it matched the stereotypical image of a treasure chest, the better. In this case, it didn't even matter what was inside. If I complimented her when she opened the box, she would be satisfied. Everyone looked at me doubtfully. Even the father seemed unsure of what to do. Guess I shouldn't have said that after all. I'll look for one on the way home. With the conversation over, I left the church along with Lucia and everyone in Starlight. I stretched my back, overwhelmed by the sense of freedom. Lucia sighed as she watched me. Despite my odd statement interrupting things, they had a boisterous and frank exchange of ideas, after which we agreed to request the aid of the noble shaman. Until then, the curse would remain bound by the relic. The fact that those two were in such a visible position clearly annoyed the father, but I thought it made for a nice bit of avant-garde furnishing. Though more of them had started spending time among us, noble spirits generally didn't mesh well with humans. When dealing with a shaman revered among their fellow nobles, any sort of mistake could expand into an international incident. During the entire discussion, Franz looked thoroughly displeased. Being someone of his stature couldn't have been easy. I'd suggest you hurry, Lapis said to him once we were outside. We'll contact our forest as soon as we can. You need to begin preparing. This might take some time, he replied. We'll contact you once preparations are complete. I'll have a sounding stone ready. 1,000 tricks, hand over the stone I lent you. I don't see you needing it anymore. What? I was sure you were giving it to me. Like hell. Even in the imperial capital, those are precious strategic asset. I wasn't sure what to think when he'd first handed it over, but it turned out that having a direct line to Franz was pretty convenient. I reluctantly returned the stone, which he snatched from my hand and gave to Lapis. Once she had put it away, Franz gave me an irascible look. Can I take it there's nothing else worrying you? He asked. Not really. I dunno, I guess I don't really know what's going on. I'm not proud to say it, but I had been nodding along simply because everyone else was. That's what you always say. And what was that random statement from earlier? Is this clownery the trade-off for your inhuman abilities? What's the treasure chest for? Didn't I say that it's irrelevant? Just forget it already. Gosh, Franz, calm down, I said. What's there to worry about when we've got such a dream team here? With Ark, Gark, Lucia, and Ansem, we're set on all fronts. Nobody got hurt during the purification, and with a group like ours, we can handle any sort of curse. No need to put everything on my shoulders. Franz ground his teeth. Search me all you want, there's nothing to find. Didn't you see that I needed Lucia's help to get atop that gate? Every time something goes wrong, you all bring it to me. I wasn't exactly idle. I was very busy resting, and I needed to buy a treasure chest. I only came this time as a precaution and ended up not doing anything, right? Let me be clear, I'm much more mundane than you seem to think I am. All I do is cause problems. So you realize it? Goddamn you. Who do you think you are? Crap. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Just as I was about to take cover behind Lucia, the ground shook. I turned around and saw Ansem calling to us, not that he was actually calling, per se. He wasn't wearing his helmet for once, and he had a few priests following behind him. Franz stopped his chastising when he saw them. Ansem was big enough that he could just barely pass under the gate. With a presence like that, anyone would shut up if they saw him approaching. But what does he want? I wondered as he cleared his throat. When he spoke, I realized how long it had been since I had heard his voice unmuffled. Krai, regarding your need for a treasure chest, the church has something. Come with us. Welcome back, Krai. How was the church? All right, I guess. I hadn't been there in a while, but it looks like Ansem is still getting along nicely with them. On my way up the staircase to the clan master's office, I ran into Eva. With everyone slandering my good name, Eva's unchanging presence was a source of salvation. All right. Krai, do you think I'm totally ignorant? All right. Man, Ansem really was something. Even if he wasn't a gigantic hunter, serving the church sounded like a lot of work. If he could befriend everyone there, then I guess what's on the inside is more important than the outside. What's more, he told me that a handful of people besides us had noticed that the Black Knight had emerged from the pendant. This meant that all the witnesses had decided not to blame him and were keeping their lips sealed. How many virtuous deeds did he do in his previous life to earn this sort of respect? As someone who was always the subject of baseless suspicion, I envied him. What I didn't envy was how nonchalant Lucia was about letting him get swallowed by her hailstorm. Maybe I'll take after Ansem and live an earnest life. But I am living earnestly. I don't know what's going on. Krai, Eva said, looking dissatisfied, you seem to be in an oddly good mood. Ah. Is it that obvious? Considering the tumult at the Church of the Radiant Spirit, I'm a little confused. It wasn't like I was upbeat because of what had happened at the church. It was because, at the very end of it all, I got a little present. Everyone should have an excellent childhood best friend. Since I was always the one receiving, I was keeping an eye out for a chance to one day repay him. Starlight said they'll do something about the mess at the church. Everyone's been panicking about the prophecy or whatever, but I get the feeling it's going to be resolved smoothly. Too much has happened in rapid succession, and I'm tired. Eva didn't respond to that. Though I hadn't done anything, my total lack of stamina meant I was worn out just from seeing everything up close. I noticed Eva was looking at me intently. Her sharp eyes sat beneath a furrowed brow, focused as if there was something written on my face. I took a step back without thinking. What? Nothing. Nothing at all. It's just that I make my living reading your expressions. The recent series of curse-related incidents has stirred up lots of chaos. A large number of people have fled from the imperial capital. If a resolution really is imminent, then we have an opportunity. I had a feeling it would be better not to inquire further. With how perfectly suited she was for her job as vice-clan master, I tended to forget that she had once worked for a major trading company. The imperial capital sure had been a hectic place recently. From the trouble with Akashic Tower and the dragon attack, to the current prophecy business, so much mayhem in so little time would make anyone want to pack their bags. You can run if you want, I told Eva, halfway serious. I'll run with you. Looking surprised, Eva held up the palm of her right hand. On her ring finger was a familiar ring. I won't run, especially not if you've entrusted me with a safety ring. I know what I'm getting myself into. That was too manly for me. I never showed that sort of resolve, and I always wore upwards of a dozen rings. At least it looked like this would be the end of the madness. I had had my fill. I had even returned Franz's sounding stone, so now I'd get to be lazy for real. The assorted chaos had affected my friends' schedules, leaving them with newfound free time, so maybe we could all hang out together. Then, Eva said something surprisingly unsurprising. I just remembered, Liz is here. She and Tino are in the clan master's office. Oh, just as the simulations predicted. She was in very good spirits. Something about receiving a present. Are you going to be okay? Oh, for once, a perfect reading. Not an inch off. My genius scares me. Is it all dancing in the palm of my hand? Is my preterhuman artifice taking shape? This was it. Just this once, I forgave myself for getting carried away with the hard-boiled act. My eyes were anything but sharp, but I knew all there was to know about my friends. After all those years spent with them, I had something to show for it. There's something I need to ask of you, I said to Eva, who was looking at me uncomfortably. The church should be sending over their best treasure chest any moment now. Could you do me a favor and get someone to take it to the lounge? Well, certainly. But it's a treasure chest, you say? I was sure even she would be surprised by the sight of it. In all my years as a hunter, I had never seen a more treasure chest. Liz was going to be pleased. I hadn't at all expected the Church of the Radiant Spirit to have so many treasure chests in its possession. They had told me to pick one out myself because they had no idea what I was getting at, but I had just laughed at the absurdity of it. In my office, Liz had Tino in a chokehold. She had definitely gotten bored while waiting for me. The moment she saw me, she tossed Tino to the side, just before she could pass out. She flew at me, every bit as energized as Eva had said. Cry Barbie. There, good girl. There. Handling her with one hand, I looked at Tino, stretched out on the ground. Her messed up hair made me think they had been sparring or something. I didn't think a bit of boredom was any excuse to have a mock fight in someone else's room. Carelessly scolding Liz could just end up making Tino's life harder, so I just gave her a look of disapproval. She didn't seem at all sorry. That was when Tino's fingertips began twitching. She had regained consciousness. She sat up and shook her head. Her cheeks flushed when she saw me. Master, when did you get here? I'm sorry you had to see me like. Don't worry. Here, you too. There. Compared to how she used to be, our junior hunter had gotten scarily durable, mentally and physically. As her master, I figured I should be happy. But perhaps I should have been more embarrassed that I couldn't keep Liz under control. What am I gonna do if Tino specializes in durability and becomes gigantic like Ansem? The moment she was on her feet, Liz grabbed Tino by the arm and shoved her in front of me. It's almost my turn to be your guard, right? I just couldn't wait any longer and came early. I'll give it my very best. You can use tea too. Though I guess nothing too weird has happened since the attack on the lounge. Ah. Right. That happened. It happened just days ago, Master. Oh, I get it now. So the daily guarding is to protect me from further ambushes. I mean, after everything that's happened, you'll have to forgive me for forgetting about the attack. But enough about that. I'm showing a rare stroke of genius today. Eyes glimmering, my dear friend Liz was waiting like an eager puppy. Ahem. Actually, Liz, I said in a stately manner, there's something I'd like to give you. She perked up. I thought it was unfair that everyone but you was getting something. I love you, she squealed. Lizzie, control yourself. Liz leaped, embracing me from behind and rubbing against my back. Her body heat was almost enough to make me sweat. I had more or less expected a reaction like this, but I wasn't sure how to feel about her exuberance. After all, we didn't even know what was in the treasure chest. I assumed she'd be happy even if it were empty, but seeing her so overjoyed had me second-guessing myself. Tino was also getting left out, but she didn't seem bothered that I hadn't gotten anything for her. She seemed much more concerned by the way Liz was pressing her nose against my neck and persistently sniffing me. I'm having it brought to the lounge. Woo. I can't wait. Let's go. Hey. Come on. Almost like magic, Liz instantly moved in front of me and was tugging on my arm. Her bright smile tugged on my heartstrings. You won't cry if it's empty, will you? I had gone from feeling like a genius to a man crushed by uncertainty. The lounge, Tino mumbled, is still being repaired. Oh right. I forgot it was in ruins. Just like Tino had said, the lounge was still in a rough state. The floor had a large crack in it, and tables were still scattered about. Unable to fulfill its role as a place to relax, the lounge had none of its usual inhabitants. But at the moment, none of that seemed to matter to Liz. Her eyes sparkled, and she was grinning from ear to ear. Oh my God! It's a treasure chest, she cried. You're right, Lizzie, and not only that, it's from a treasure vault, isn't it? A genuine treasure vault chest, Eva affirmed. It's got that distinct impression. Hearing that, Tino looked envious. It wasn't flashy. It was a basic but absolutely flawless treasure chest. The wooden body was framed by rusted metal and had a large padlock affixed. It was big enough that Liz or Tino could easily fit inside, and heavy enough that I couldn't lift it. It was the spitting image of a treasure chest. I couldn't imagine a single treasure hunter would be averse to the sight of this thing, all the more so if they were a thief, a role that entailed lockpicking. Of all the things you could find in a treasure vault, treasure chests were among the most exciting. A rare spawn in vaults, the chests themselves were relics and sometimes contained several more relics. This was probably a result of mana material recreating concepts of chests filled with valuables. There were theories that relics from chests tended to be high level, and some people had indeed become incredibly wealthy by finding chests containing multiple rare, powerful relics. It was fair to say that finding a chest in a treasure vault was every hunter's dream, though, by the way, they were sometimes empty. At the same time, however, treasure chests entailed a big risk. Most of them were set with sturdy locks and deadly traps. Relic chests were tough things, so breaking the chest and snatching its contents wasn't possible. Hence why so many parties wanted a thief who could pick locks and disarm traps. This also explained why unopened chests sometimes popped up on the market. I couldn't blame anyone for not wanting to attempt a disarmament when failure generally resulted in death. On several occasions, our very own party had nearly been wiped out that way. The underground storage facility Ansem had brought me to had contained several chests, all of different materials and styles. I was told they were donations from faithful hunters, so they had to be handled properly, and they were dangerous, so they couldn't be opened without excessive caution. Thus, the church didn't know quite what to do with them. They told me to take my pick, a funny choice of words, so I took the best of the best. There were a few other metal-framed wooden chests, but this one had the most aesthetic appeal and treasure chestiness. Even if it turned out to be empty, I could use it to store all my odds and ends, emphasis on odd. Only problem was that this thing was super heavy. It's really cool, isn't it? I said. The moment I saw it, I knew this was the chest I wanted. Woo. It's been too long since I've opened a chest. Hey, T, get over here. Huh? Are you sure? Responding to Liz's beckoning, Tino hurried over. It was cute the way she really seemed hesitant about joining in, but Liz was probably using this as a training opportunity. Picking locks was a very dangerous endeavor. I lightly bumped Eva on the arm, and we moved to a safe distance. Most traps were single-use, meaning we should be fine so long as we had our safety rings, but it's better to be careful. Krai, what's in that chest? Eva asked me in a quiet voice. What do you think? Eva seemed to thoroughly consider it. The answer, I don't know. As far as I was aware, there was only one way to know what a treasure vault's chest contained, and that was to use the magnifying glass relic, treasure tracer. However, the hunter who discovered this desirable relic was assassinated shortly after they made its discovery public, and the relic itself was destroyed. A second treasure tracer hadn't yet been found. Brimming with excitement, Liz checked the lock, but something seemed to puzzle her. Crybaby, this lock is a really simple one. And for traps? Chem. She knocked on the chest, then picked it up and checked the underside. Liz, you're super incredible. That chest is too heavy for me to even lift up. You sure are strong. Opening relic chests required not only knowledge but also skillful use of the senses. You could say that their use of all 5 senses and the 6th to challenge unknown mechanisms made people like Liz the best suited for treasure hunting. Looking perplexed, she examined the chest from every angle. How about we just try opening it up? Agreed, Tino said. It doesn't seem like there are any explosive traps or anything. I'll let you do the honors. Chances to open chests are a rare thing, and you can use this as an excuse to show Crybaby how much you've learned. Really? Are you sure? Tino's eyes were wide open, and she sounded happy. Eva was surprised, but Liz just showed us a proud smile. Yeah, You're a great teacher, even if you did just have her in a choke hold. Tino crouched down before the lock dangling in front of the chest. She removed a pick from her hair and carefully inserted it into the keyhole. Just as Liz had said, it was a simple mechanism. After just a few seconds, there was a clicking sound, and the lock came off. It was such a deft movement that it reminded me of Liz. But this was only the beginning. Picking locks was important, but even more important was disarming traps, as this was when lives were on the line. Relieved to have the lock undone, Tino smiled at Liz, then at me. Something about her boastful smile resembled Liz's. I couldn't help but wave at her. Then it happened. The motion was unbelievably silent, smooth, and comical. The unlocked chest opened without a sound, hopped up, covered Tino, who still had her back to the chest, swallowed her whole, then returned to its original position. It was all over in less than a second. Liz had been unable to react, the same went for Eva, and I'm all but certain Tino herself had no idea what had happened. Liz blinked. Eva's expression was vague and unmoving. Nobody said anything. Those movements were smooth as Tino's. No, that's not it. Good thing Eva and I kept our distance, that's not it either. Should I be worried that she didn't even scream? So it wasn't a chest. So was it a monster? Or was it a relic? What was it? Then I remembered that when I got the chest, they said something about people occasionally going missing in the storage unit. And that was why they had called me over. With her mouth over her hand, Eva whispered what nobody else was willing to say. Tino. She's been eaten. I always thought this might happen to. No, stop thinking like that. What were the people of this land doing hiding so much dangerous shit? What? Crybaby, what is this thing? Liz cried frantically. Then the treasure chest swallowed her up. My perfect chest closed its lid and returned to its original position. Eva looked at me vacantly. Silence reigned over the lounge. Perhaps satisfied with a meal of two, the chest stayed completely still. Or maybe it would move the moment one of us turned our backs on it. Liz had definitely been trusting my judgment back there. Makes sense, since I was the one who brought it over and all. To think someone as acclimated to crises as Liz would be eaten so easily. She could have tried to fight it. She could have been her usual violent self. Krai, what in the world is this? Eva looked at me with unconcealed fear, something I rarely saw from her. I wanted to tell her to calm down, but I was too uncalm to get the words out of my throat. But this was fine. I was sure of it. Liz had survived being swallowed by dragons, so I was sure she could shake off being eaten by a treasure chest. As for Tino, she would just have to do her best. So what is this thing? I looked at the man-eating treasure chest that was pretending to be a very normal treasure chest. I was aware of monsters that could disguise themselves as treasure chests, but I didn't think that someone like Liz, who had been through many gauntlets and developed quite a nose for danger, would be so easily fooled. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself. Not even my best would do us much good here, and there was a good chance Liz was still trying to break out. I'll call someone. Someone who can destroy that thing. I'll call Ark. Oh. That was a good idea. But how was Eva calmer than I when I was supposed to be the one accustomed to crises? While keeping an eye fixed on the treasure chest, Eva moved towards the exit. Then, the moment she made a break for it, the chest closed the distance in an instant and ate her up. I felt like I might vomit. Shit. Am I dreaming? What a gluttonous treasure chest. How much does it hold? The treasure chest resumed its state of disguise. You're not fooling me. Not one bit. I have no idea what I'm going to do if Ark ends up getting devoured. Heck, how is this thing's capacity clearly greater than its size? That was when Lyle's party entered the lounge. Arg, when did Krai get here? What's that chest over there? Or. Before I could say anything, the chest flew at them and swallowed the whole lot of them in one bite. What incredible capacity. Why? They weren't even running. Oh man, is it trying to erase any witnesses? It was all my fault. All because I had been drawn in by the allure of wanting to look cool. Oh my, Krai, what are you doing here all by? What's this Tresu, Ak? Marietta and Sven were both eaten upon arrival. I no longer knew what was what. This was a terrifying thing if it could eat a level 6 hunter like it was nothing. When I thought about it, I realized that everyone was getting eaten while their attention was on me. If they had the state of mind they took when raiding treasure vaults, I was sure this wouldn't be happening. Maybe I should just let myself get eaten right off the bat. Of course this happened after I had returned the sounding stone. Since I was planning to spend the day shut in my room, I didn't have any relics on me. Though I'm not sure I could have handled this even if I had any relic of my choosing. If you're so voracious, you should just have a chocolate bar, I whispered, unsure what else I could do. I can't imagine humans taste very good. The next moment, the treasure chest leaped forward, landing right in front of me. Startled, I took a step back. And the chest did nothing. I had stopped moving out of sheer resignation, but after a few moments, the chest still hadn't done anything. After gobbling up Liz and everyone else, was this thing really not going to eat me? Was it a gourmet? God, to think this thing too heavy for me to lift, yet could move like a snake and hit the ground without making a sound. That sort of stealth horrified me. Wait, hold on. My eyes opened wide. I took a deep breath and made up my mind. I gently touched the lid of the chest, opened it just slightly, slipped a chocolate bar through the gap, then closed it again. For something so heavy, its lid was pretty light. Even I could lift it. I could hardly ask for a better treasure chest. Large capacity, silent, automated functions. I suppose it's also perfectly secure. The treasure chest didn't respond. How could it? It was a treasure chest after all. It couldn't talk for the same reasons the carpet couldn't. One of the most famous relics was the magic bag, a bag that held much more than its appearance suggested. I had just one, and it was only capable of holding specific items, but these bags were rare, coveted, and very useful. Magic bags were the sort of relics where, even though one that could store anything would sell for upwards of 100 million, they rarely made their way onto the market. Thinking about that, I came to understand how this chest so easily got the jump on Liz. It was because this wasn't a monster or a phantom. It wasn't a monster or a phantom, so she deferred to my judgment. Are there magic bags that can hold living creatures? Once again, I opened the lid. Inside was impenetrable darkness. Unfortunately, there hadn't been much research into what went on inside magic bags. This was in part because they usually couldn't hold life forms. I thrust my hand into the darkness and retrieved the chocolate bar I had put in moments earlier. There were some junk items that didn't let you remove what you had put in, but it appeared this chest wasn't one of those. My carpet, who spent his days indulging in debauchery with his girlfriend carpets, could learn a thing or two from this chest. I can add and remove as I please. Perfect. With a slight snap, I bit off a bit of the chocolate bar and savored the sweet sensation. I started craving some tea when I came to my senses. I didn't need a chest that could swallow thieves and assailant. I threw my arm into the chest. Eva. I want Eva. I want Eva. My fingertips came in contact with something soft and warm. I tightened my grip and pulled with all my might. Exiting the darkness, Eva popped into sight. Confused, she just sat on the floor until she eventually came to understand the situation and let out a deep sigh. Eva with her glasses crooked was a very rare sight. I thought I was going to die. It was pitch black, and I had no clue which direction was which. Thank goodness she's alive. It seemed her memories were also intact. It was probably some function of the chest that allowed me to fish her out all by myself. What a quality item. Eva must have been scared, as I noticed tears at the corners of her eyes. It's a magic bag, so there's no way you would have died. This is a magic bag. Really? She ran up to me. Why, you should have said so. I was incredibly scared. I guess she had regained her strength. I let out an internal sigh of relief as I apologized to her. I had also been incredibly scared. Liz and the others were hunters, but Eva was just a clan employee. With so much less mana material, among other things, that must have been a nightmare. Even the safety ring I gave her probably wouldn't have been much use. Did the chest not eat me because it saw the church give it to me? Or is it because I complimented it? A real opportunist, this one. I took a deep breath and muttered a certain name as I stuck my arm in the chest. I want Liz. I want Liz. After learning what had happened, Sven let out a groan. I get it now. Jay, just more of your antics. Lyle and his party reacted similarly. They didn't look angry, rather, they were shocked that they had been caught off guard by a treasure chest. Hunters didn't just battle in treasure vaults, though that didn't necessarily include ambushes inside one's own clan house. Despite being surrounded by those it had just eaten, the chest remained perfectly still. As for Sven and company, they might have been a bloodthirsty bunch, but they weren't going to seek revenge on a mere object. But damn, a magic bag that can hold living creatures. If we sold it, we could build a second clan house. Has one hell of a capacity too. It fit all of us inside. The hunters all looked at the chest with evident disgust. They had a point, but was I the only one who considered it a fatal flaw that the chest liked to gulp people down? Especially since it looked like they couldn't get out on their own. Putting aside a certain carpet that didn't allow riders, too much dedication to one's role wasn't necessarily a good thing. Crybaby, I could have gotten out, you know? Liz said. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't showing any signs of damaged pride and seemed her usual self. It's just that when I saw T, I tried to grab her, but then the exit closed. I turned towards Tino, but she had her back to us and was quivering silently. I guess that's what happens when you suddenly get swallowed from behind. The chest probably mistook her for a robber since she was the one who had broken the lock. But this thing is huge, no doubt about it, Sven said. There was a town in there. We didn't get a chance to explore it though. A town. There was a town. What's this chest doing eating a town? Just how much can it hold? Just about every magic bag sold for a hefty sum, so how much would this one sell for? I began to wonder if maybe knowledge of this chest hadn't become common because it ate anyone who knew of it. I had made the discovery of the century, and it was a terrible one. Eva adjusted her glasses as I patted the perfect treasure chest. Krai, are you planning to sell that to a trading company? Nah, I'm not gonna sell it. Why do you ask? It's just that it might disrupt the balance. Even a normal magic bag could affect the market, so something with this sort of capacity would be cataclysmic. I could think of a number of potential uses for it. Like, maybe you could drain a pond or something. What an insane thing I've gotten my hands on. Maybe I'll make it fight the carpet. Chem. Liz said like something had just occurred to her. Does this mean my turn is over? Why? Where's the curse? Crybaby, am I getting shortchanged? What? What was that about a curse? Why did she want something like that? Was I talking to Luke? Who else would insist that they should go through hell because everyone else got to? I guess she sort of was Luke, mentally speaking. As Liz started making a scene, the others got ready to leave. You can leave us out of this mess, Sven said. Give me a break. Come on, Marietta, we're off to the training ground. I guess we could use some training as well. Never one to enjoy standing out, Lyle sighed and stood up. Who'd expect to get eaten by a treasure chest in their own clan house? What if this leaves lasting trauma? You're not the only one traumatized. Likewise, I'm going to rest. Even Eva was abandoning me. I was being left with Tino, a noisy Liz, and the chest that had caused all this trouble. It was fine. They could rest. I was used to things like this. One more time, crybaby, Liz pestered me, leaning against my back. Let me have a do-over. I definitely won't fail this time. Come on. This isn't over because you failed or anything. And what do you mean by failing? I hadn't planned for this to happen when I gave her the treasure chest. How could I convince her of that? Would she feel better if I let her have her fun? I gave in and let her hug my back. But then she suddenly stopped and looked at Tino. Under her harsh gaze, Tino twitched and glanced to the side. Come to think of it, you've been awfully quiet since coming out of that chest. You hiding something, T? What are you talking about, Lizzie? Her eyes were darting around. Thieves were generally good liars, but I suppose the mentor-student hierarchy disrupted that. Liz pressed her lips to my neck, then moved off me. Clenching her fist, she grinned as she walked up to Tino. Looking cornered, Tino looked around before making up her mind and darting towards me. Master, here. Caught off guard, Liz still managed to snag her leg. Tino held out her arm, but fell, hitting the ground face first just before she could reach me. Yet she didn't seem hurt as she raised her head and opened her hand in front of my eyes. An old ring rolled from her palm. It was made of wood and had a strange pattern cleanly engraved on its surface. It also had the distinct atmosphere of a relic. That was on the ground, Tino said, eyes darting about wildly, so I just sort of went for it. Then the exit closed. Who? T, are you saying you took my role? No, Lizzie. I didn't know what I was doing. Young Tino had entirely taken after Liz. Honestly, I was amazed that she had chosen the ring over the exit. She had become a real thief. Liz was stunned, so much so that she had apparently forgotten to be angry. I got the feeling that if I didn't say something, Tino would be in more trouble than she realized. I picked up the ring and put it on. Then, before Liz could regain her sanity, I said, "It's all according to plan. So you can calm down." Huh? You planned this? So I don't have to kill T after all? Yeah, Tino was growing increasingly pale. Her ability to stand up for herself despite Liz's thorough discipline was genuinely incredible. But this wasn't the time to be applauding her growth. I needed to keep Liz distracted. Come on, calm down, Liz. Here, I've got it. Why not explore the town? I don't know who made it, but it's a town inside a chest. I'm sure there's something interesting. I turned and looked at the chest. A town inside a chest. Any idea who made it? Liz blinked. Tino was sweating bullets, though maybe it was a bit late for that. Without saying anything, I went up to the chest, opened the lid, and stuck my arm in. No points for guessing what I said. Come out, everyone who went missing at the church. Come out, everyone who went missing at the church. Over 10 priests emerged from the treasure chest. Not even Liz could hide her surprise as more and more of them popped out. They displayed varied reactions upon emerging. There were some who seemed to doubt their very eyes, while some were moved to tears. Liz and the others hadn't been in there too long, so they hadn't been affected much, but since some of these people from the church had been in there for years, I couldn't blame them for crying. Look at Eva, she had grown teary after being in there for just a few minutes. I can't thank you enough. You really saved us. Yeah, I'm just glad you're okay. All's well that ends well. Talking to them, it sounded like they had all been swallowed up when they had accidentally undone the lock while cleaning the storage room. I don't know how you accidentally undo a lock, but I took it as a sign that these weren't the most diligent priests. By the sound of it, there hadn't been much alarm when any of them went missing. But wouldn't someone find it suspicious if they found a lock undone when that wasn't supposed to be the case? I furrowed my brow and examined the chest. And at that very moment, the chest picked up the lock and secured it. I see. So it has an automated lock. One that sprouts arms. Is that a thing? So you guys made that town? Liz asked. No, one of them answered. That was there before us. You see, down there, you don't get hungry or thirsty. That was really something. Some treasure vaults operated on different rules from those of our world, and this chest might be something similar. I could see all sorts of uses for this, like draining an ocean or something. Oh, maybe I could use it to keep ingredients fresh? Potential uses aside, this was undoubtedly one hell of a relic. If the Empire found out about it, they might take it from me. All sorts of terrible possibilities began to occur to me. I clapped my hands and turned to the priests who had recently returned to the surface world. For now, why not just say you were spirited away and return to your families? We'll take care of this chest, so please keep what happened here between us. Thanking us profusely, the priests departed from the clan house. I didn't know how much they planned to tell Father Edgar, but, well, I guess I was willing to return this thing if they asked me to. This super capable chest was more than I could handle, and I couldn't see how I'd put it to use. I could save space in my room by storing my relics in this thing, but being unable to leave without outside help was a huge deal breaker. Man, I never expected I'd end up saving anyone. Life is full of strange experiences. These past few days had been a whirlwind of strange troubles, but if some people got saved as a result, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. I was ready to wrap things up, but then Liz looked at me with uncharacteristic severity. Crybaby, something tells me those guys come from different periods. Not all of them had the same uniform. Heh. I bet that without the sun, their sense of time got all screwed up. You think it's possible people don't get older in there? I fell silent as a chill ran down my back. Tino covered her ears as if she were having a bad premonition. I could relate. I didn't want to be involved in any more crazy stuff. They really were spirited away, weren't they? I think I'll hold off on having this thing fight the carpet. This isn't something to play around with. I took a deep breath and tried to put it all out of my mind. Sure, our friend the treasure chest was a little freaky, but that would be fine as long as I didn't use it. Luckily, it looked very nice, so it could just be some interior furnishing. Well, for now, I'm just glad I got to see how much you two have grown, I said, holding out my hand and looking at my new relic ring. Tino looked incredibly surprised to hear that. And what sort of growth is that? Liz asked through pursed lips. If I had to say, I guess that she had prioritized Tino over the ring. On the other hand, that Tino went for the relic instead of the exit proved that she had become a real hunter. I don't think I can take any more trouble. I'll have to take this ring to Mattis later. Humming to myself, I took the ring off. Or I tried to. Then it hit me. Master, what do you think of the ring? Tino asked with a restless smile. I feel like I've been shown up by T. Well, I'm not gonna argue with Krai Baby about it, Liz said, being more agreeable than usual. I cleared my throat and shoved my hand into my pocket. It's not too shabby. I'm gonna go get it appraised by Mattis. I can't get this thing off. Could it be that thing's cursed? What am I gonna do? I had a cursed ring. As far as relic shortcomings went, being unremovable was a fairly common one. Sort of like Luke's devil's sword that couldn't be dropped while in use, anything that couldn't be physically removed or would return on its own if discarded was considered to be cursed by hunters. Some relics ended up like this due to what was supposed to be a precaution against them getting lost, but most of them were nettlesome items that had some sort of negative effect. Of course, they were still relics. If their charge ran out, then so would their adhesion. Except that the majority of these items had high capacities and the ability to drain mana from their wearer. Relics of this variety were very likely manifestations of cursed items from the distant past. This theory was heavily supported by the fact that, like cursed items, the best way to get rid of an unremovable relic was to have it purified by a priest. Before this could turn into an ordeal, we quickly headed over to Mathis's shop. He wasted no time taking a look at the item, and with the Tino effect improving his mood, we began to discuss this ring that wouldn't come off despite not feeling particularly tight. The moment he heard what had happened, his cheeks began twitching. Krai, don't tell me you really put this thing on without thinking. No, not at all. You dunce. You've been collecting relics for how many years? Or did you just start yesterday? Many relics were largely unknown, and plenty of them were dangerous. That's why relic appraisers were so valuable. Tino grew pale at the sight of Mathis's stern expression, but Liz was more than willing to fight back. Did I hear that right? Mattis, does his high level mean nothing to you? No way in hell he put that on without thinking. With a grunt, Mattis scrutinized me. Liz's objection brought out a sigh of relief from Tino. Yeah, let's chalk this up to preterhuman artifice. I folded my arms and put on a hard-boiled smile, a skill that was very convenient at times like these. Don't worry about that, just get on with the appraisal. I want to see if I'm on the right track. Comparing results, is it? Give me a minute. I've seen this ring before. What a reliable guy. I was right to make this my go-to shop. Mattis retrieved a thick, handmade book from the back of the shop. The product of decades of experience, this was an encyclopedia packed with information, much of it known only to him. With a thump, he set the book down and thumbed through it until he stopped at a certain page. This is it. HMPH. Who else but noble spirits would make a ring out of wood? Not every day you get something so vexing on your finger. Where'd you find it? This was definitely it. The ring in the picture looked exactly like the one on my finger. Next to it was a name. Hermit's ring. It's a ring used for training. That's what the noble spirits told me. Only a handful of appraisers know of it. They, the noble spirits that is, can't stand that one of their items is loose in the world. They shared this information with us, hoping it would help them recover their relic. I see. Ah, damn. I can't picture it at all, not after Chris and Eliza have defined my image of noble spirits. Mattis continued his explanation in a grave voice. I had shown him a fair amount of dangerous items in the past, but it had been some time since I had last seen him like this. His heart would probably stop if I showed him the treasure chest. Among the ancient noble spirits, there were a select few with exceptional power and blood. They were the higher nobles, and one of their oracles made this ring to obtain the powers of the higher dimensions. Just goes to show, it's not only humans that get up to no good. Am I gonna get powers from higher dimensions? That didn't sound too great. Did this mean I would have to start adventuring with my friends? So are there any noteworthy effects? I asked, a bit excited. Mattis took a deep breath, paused, then said gravely, Krai, listen closely. This ring attracts curses. It attracts curses? That's a ring made by a higher noble oracle, in other words, a shaman, so they could handle greater malign energies. There's a similar technique known as kodoku, and this is an extension of that. The ring was set aside when it proved too effective, as it had led to the deaths of several higher nobles. But because it's still talked about, it's manifested as a relic. Those long lifespans of theirs aren't always a good thing. Krai, that ring is much more of a hazard than you realize. You'll need a capable noble shaman just to take it off. Even if you are a level 8. I felt like I had just taken a blow to the head. Tino looked at me with concern. The wooden ring didn't look as dangerous as Mattis had said it was, but I guess that's just how some items were. I spent a moment staring at the ring, then stuck my hands out and said, Hey, Mattis. I know this is sudden, but I'm not wearing any other relics that attract curses, am I? What are you talking about? It was just that I had been bombarded with curses since before I put this thing on. I couldn't imagine what having to deal with even more would be like. Maybe there wouldn't be enough room. They'd have to form a line. I have a feeling the two negatives will form a positive. Thank goodness this doesn't seem like anything serious. Temper your spirits. By losing to a devil sword, you've disgraced our name. The apprentices all swung their swords single-mindedly. With the damage caused by the devil sword still apparent, an intense fervor unlike any other had fallen over the dojo of Soln Roel, the sword saint. After glancing at his students, Soln looked down to his side, where the source of all the mayhem now rested. The devil sword was thrust into a pedestal and glimmered in the unobstructed sunlight. It had reportedly glowed an ominous crimson when disrupting people's minds, like it had when Nadoli wielded it, but now it was black as the void. That eerie glow bewitched people and brought madness upon anyone who picked it up. Its demonic nature was the real thing. If Nadoli, one of the most talented apprentices, had been possessed, then this was unlike anything Soln had seen before. The talents of Soln and his students had earned them a special place in the imperial capital. Some of his apprentices came from the city's most powerful noble families, and they were sometimes given deference equal to the knights. It was that deep trust that led them to help with security at the gathering of the White Blade. If word spread that some of the swordsmen of this dojo had been possessed by a devil sword and gone on a rampage, their reputation would plummet, and so might their status. It was thanks to the swift actions of Sir Franz that it hadn't yet come to this. Though they couldn't disguise the fact that the dojo had been ruined, they had placed a gag order in the nick of time. There might be rumors, but as long as no outsiders had been hurt and no proof existed, there was no reason to worry. Apparently, the 1,000 Tricks had asked him to take care of the matter. Real cunning of him, seeing as he was the one who had sent the sword over. The one group that did know what had really happened was the students themselves. Thanks to a display of power from Soln himself, only a few apprentices withdrew after the incident. He demonstrated what a human could achieve through training to be a swordsman. After all, a foundation of the Soln School of Swordsmanship was to train the heart, mind, and techniques, so that one could face impossible odds with all their strength and maintain a calm mind no matter the situation. By this metric, Nadoli still had a long way to go. It didn't matter whether or not the 1,000 Tricks was to blame for this, the results were still a source of embarrassment for Soln. He placed a hand on the pommel. Soln had traveled all over the world so that he could master the blade. He had duelled many powerful foes, been blessed with many friends, and at some point earned himself the title of Sword Saint. Like a sharp blade, a tempered spirit wouldn't be broken by a cursed devil sword. Soln himself still had room for improvement, but he could at least shake off a cursed blade. Dispatched by the 1,000 Tricks, the troglodytes were repairing the dojo's damage with incredible speed. It wouldn't be long before the building was as good as new, though Soln was starting to suspect it might look a bit different than it used to. The apprentices watched as Soln calmly held the devil sword. "There is indeed a terrible power lurking within this blade," he said, his gaze sweeping across them. "This is a demonic weapon that leads its wielder astray and guiles them into committing massacres. But it's the weakness of the heart that it preys upon. Attain the placidity of a lake, and you won't be swayed by a sword." Therefore, due to his unshakably earnest and obsessively pure desire to be a better swordsman, Luke Sycall had been able to hold the sword without being led astray. In fact, all famous swords could sway a person's heart to some degree or another. Anyone who could touch this sword and maintain their sanity was instantly worthy of being regarded as a true swordsman, regardless of their technical skills or achievements. Just as holy swords chose their wielders, so did devil swords. If used by one with the right heart, a devil sword could be a very reliable weapon. Anyone who thinks they're worthy can challenge the devil's sword whenever they please. I'll be there to preside. If you can fight back this blade's wiles, that will prove you've entered a new phase of your training. With a new, clear-cut objective, the apprentices were filled with renewed determination. At this rate, the appearance of a swordsman who could triumph over the devil's sword wasn't far off. Perhaps the recent tragedy wouldn't be without its benefits. Soln heard shouts of determination from his apprentices. Nadoli was among them. He had recovered from his wounds and was swinging his sword with absolute dedication. "Master," said Luke, the one person swinging a wooden sword, "where's my trial?" "Luke, you can learn not to cut. I did that a long time ago, when Krai told me to. Now, Master, I wanna cut some really tough guys. I seem to recall telling you the same thing." It then occurred to Soln that maybe Luke hadn't been led astray by the sword because his heart was already wayward. Soln let out a deep sigh as a very bad feeling swept over him. Even for the sword saint, guiding his pupils down the right path was no easy task. Does this mean our troubles weren't for nothing? What magnificent amplification. This staff is comparable to a powerful relic. Both fear and excitement mingled in her assistant Anna's voice. Sage Cluster tapped a finger against her temples as she began to understand that those stories she heard of Lucia's brother were no joke. The most important professors of the Zebrudia Academy of Magic were all gathered in the lecture hall. Though the repairs on the building and the barriers were still underway, they had all come together to hear of a new discovery. In the center of the hall was a strange staff of pure black. This, however, was no ordinary staff. Just about anyone remotely versed in magic could probably see the whirlpool that formed as it drew mana in from the surrounding air. This was a rare trait found only in the very best staves. A superior staff would, of course, channel the mana of its wielder, but also that in the air around them, converting it into spells with extreme efficiency. This particular staff had been made from the ashes of that Black World tree, which had wrought so much destruction. They had been surprised to learn that the ashes would make a superb catalyst, and all the more so to learn that they could be used to make a top-tier staff. At this point, the professors didn't even appear to be angry over the damage done to the academy. The Black World tree. Is it fair to assume there's truth to the notion that it was made to mimic the World tree? Could the mana absorption perhaps be a secondary effect? Considering what we saw, it makes far more sense that the absorption is there to aid its growth. The World Tree is said to have drawn in immense amounts of mana through roots that have spent years upon years in the ground. This staff's absorption is meant to fill that same role. A magus would do just about anything to get their hands on a staff that significantly enhanced their abilities. High-grade staves were incredibly rare. Materials, makers' techniques, and the time of production could drastically alter a staff's capabilities, and no two were identical. Even for craftsmen capable of producing first-rate staves, only 1 out of 10 produced could withstand actual use. Most importantly, though, the staves produced in the modern era were overwhelmingly inferior to their relic counterparts. Even the staves of famous magi rarely manifested more than once, and any modern staves that could compete with relics were inordinately expensive. At an institution like the Zebrudia Academy of Magic, distinguished staves weren't quite so rare, but when the possibility of making a powerful one arose, it was all but inevitable that everyone cast aside their work on restoring the barriers to come together. Sage, who had been a magus much longer than her appearance suggested, had hardly seen anything like it. If what we know is true, the previous staff had never gone rampant while being used by the magus that befriended the Sword Saint. Perhaps it turned aggressive because it suffered mana deficiency after spending all those years in storage without being used. Which would mean the attacks from Rosemary and our magi satiated it. The reasoning is sound. In other words, the 1,000 Tricks sent us this staff anticipating this outcome? That couldn't be. Their eyes were being clouded by the discovery of a lifetime. If Sage stayed silent, this conversation would veer off into bizarre territory. Wait, she said. No matter his reasons, we shouldn't forgive the fact that he damaged the academy and endangered the city. Yes, but Professor Sage, not even the Empire has said anything. After all, the 1,000 Tricks just recently saved the Emperor's life and hindered the plans of Nine-Tailed Shadow Fox at the Supreme Warrior Festival. Criticizing him now would put us in an awkward position. They had a point. Sage had personally looked into the 1,000 Tricks, and despite her low opinion of the young man, she was forced to admit his accomplishments were astounding. One of the professors scowled as they looked at Lucia standing despondently next to Sage. Not only that, he's Lucia's brother, they said. We're adoptive siblings, Professor, Lucia corrected. And I'm also of the opinion that my brother went too far in this instance. Why was his little sister taking Sage's side when all the other professors were siding with the 1,000 Tricks? If her daily conversations were anything to go off, it was because he was always creating extra work for her. Though strangely enough, if you listened long enough to those conversations, you could hear an affectionate tone in her voice. Adoptive or not, that's beside the point, the professor objected. The problem is that the costs of a conflict with him would vastly outweigh the benefits. Our time would be better put to use exploring the new possibilities of this Mockworld tree, or whatever it is. If it expands by absorbing mana, then under the right circumstances, can't we reproduce it infinitely? The ability to infinitely reproduce a material on par with the world tree would be a historic discovery. They had entirely gotten over the immense damage the tree had done to the academy. Of course, with Sage and the other professors around, they would be able to manage the situation should another rampage occur. Still, that was no reason for the professors to be so casual about the possibility. But such a statement would only fall on deaf ears, a fact Sage was more or less resigned to. Now then, one of the professors said, we should discuss which laboratory will be in charge of researching this staff, however. The room froze. The staff's properties alone made it a fascinating subject. Anyone involved in magic research would be willing to pay an arm and a leg for it. Normally, the rights would go to whoever had made the staff, but these were unique circumstances. Stopping the staff's rampage had required the efforts of everyone in the faculty. Sage let out another sigh at the prospect of another long argument. But then the professor from earlier said something unexpected. I'm sure you all have your own propositions, but Lucia Roji is the 1,000 Tricks' younger sister, and she works for Professor Sage. As I'm sure you're all aware, he made a spellbook for Lucia, and it's very likely that he similarly brought us the staff with her in mind. I believe it is only sensible that we entrust the staff with Professor Sage's laboratory. Does anyone object? At once, the other professors all looked at Sage. What could all these renowned magi be thinking, ceding such precious materials to another? Sage looked around at her colleagues. Nobody appeared to have any objections. No, there was something. Their gazes were so heavy they weighed her down. Understood, she said with a grimace. However, this staff is undeniably the product of everyone's efforts, so you will all be kept up to date regarding everything we uncover. This is sure to go down in history. We look forward to following your progress, Professor Sage. This was a collar. It was a form of bait meant to entice Sage, the one person still opposed to their current stance, not to step out of line. Of course, it was also done out of respect for the 1,000 Tricks. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that he treasured his sister. The common sentiment at the academy was to forgive him. If all the victims were leaning in that direction, then Sage was in no position to say otherwise. It seemed this matter was solved. But that didn't mean she had forgiven him. He had already twisted Lucia's talents by giving her that deranged spellbook. "Be sure to pass on our regards, Thousand Tricks' sister," one of the professors called. Still peeved as she was at the start, she clenched a fist and shouted back at the professor, who was a good few decades older than her. "We're adoptive siblings. Damn that Thousand Tricks. Using our nature as alchemists against us was cowardly." Freed from his interrogation, Nikolov Smoky left the jail with Citri once she arrived to pick him up. He had only been held and questioned for a few days, but it had felt like months. Nikolov was the head of the Primus Institute and a man of noble birth, and thus had a fair amount of power, but the sheer magnitude of this incident meant even he didn't get off scot-free. It would be a bit longer before the rest of the researchers would return to the institute. They wouldn't have been let off nearly so easily if they had been fighting over genuine strawberry blaze and not just strawberry milk. If nothing else, Nikolov would have been removed from his position and banished from the institute. In that case, the institute would have been ruined, since just about every member of the faculty had been involved in the struggle. "I'm sorry," Citri said, noticing Nikolov's apparent foul mood. "I, too, allowed myself to be fooled. Krai has something of a sense of humor. HMPH. Who would expect him to deceive his own party members? He's as merciless as they say." Nikolov had heard that the Thousand Tricks toyed with the Emperor himself while escorting him to a conference. Numerous trips into treasure vaults must have numbed his sense of caution. Though it was rare for someone to grow numb not only to dangers but also to authority, it wasn't unheard of. The most famous of Zabrudian champions, Solis Rodin, was one such person. Citri held her hands in front of her face, shielding herself from Nikolov's glare. "He can be exceptionally cruel." Those were clearly crocodile tears. An apprentice who had made a name for herself among the vicious world of alchemists wasn't going to cry over something like this. The title of prodigy wasn't just some pretty decoration. It was proof that she was versed in all the skills necessary to an alchemist, including playing politics. "Oh, quit it. Our idiocy made us susceptible to such trickery. In fact, this incident has taught me just how many people want me dead. Citri, I take it nothing happened in my absence?" "Nothing. After all, just about everyone was arrested." Or, "We've never been more humiliated." The Knights hadn't arrested Citri, which was fortunate for Nikolov as she was technically his former apprentice. In his precarious situation, few people were willing to associate with him. She hadn't been arrested because there was clear evidence she hadn't been involved in the fighting. That, too, must have been part of the Thousand Tricks' calculations. Nikolov could tell his former apprentice had affections for Krai Andrey, and Krai seemed to pay considerable attention to his childhood friend. A combo that consisted of the famously prescient preterhuman artificer and the alchemic prodigy would be a force to be reckoned with. Though for now, Citri showed no particular interest in going up in the world. Suddenly, Nikolov realized why his former apprentice was in such a good mood despite the circumstances. "Citri, did you snatch research materials from the other departments while everyone was gone?" "How dare you," she said after a pause. "Do you take me for someone who would do something so terrible? What proof do you have?" It took more than knowledge and talent to become the prodigy. You also needed initiative and the guts to take risks. Citri made a face as if she had been hurt, but she was a woman who smiled when she was truly wounded. The best alchemists didn't easily reveal their true emotions. Nikolov looked her directly in the eye. She furrowed her brow and tried to resist, but eventually she glanced to the side. "I didn't snatch anything, but, well, I couldn't just let the Knights take everything. Nobody was around, so it was a very real possibility. You goddamn opportunist." The Knights had been outdone. Even if the materials were confiscated, every letter and every line was already inside Citri's head. They certainly couldn't go and erase her memories. Some of these materials contained knowledge that even Nikolov didn't possess, things the other departments were keeping top secret. Knowledge formed the roots of the Primus Institute, and Citri had essentially stolen it all. Of course, Nikolov wouldn't have been surprised to learn if someone else had used the disorder to steal from his laboratory. The institute had just been wrapped up in large-scale turmoil. Surely there must have been other members willing to pilfer the materials and results of other laboratories. Finding these thieves now wouldn't be easy, but simply letting them go would damage Nikolov's reputation. Just as he was beginning to consider how to handle this, Citri, in a perfectly natural voice and unfaltering expression, said something that threw him for a loop. Nikolov, the truth is, a real sample of strawberry blaze exists. The liquid originally contained in that bottle, Krai took it and poured it down the drain. The hell are you talking about? He had a legendary potion that could get you executed just for possession, and he just poured it down the drain? Even safer potions weren't disposed of like that. Nikolov couldn't believe it. I don't blame you for thinking that, Citri replied. However, the Thousand Tricks specializes in doing the unbelievable. Why did you say that like a question? Citri, are you implying there's a reason he did something so unfathomable? It was a simple question, but Nikolov couldn't keep the eagerness out of his voice. No matter how diluted, if some of the potion was in there, that could give them a big clue. The imperial capital's sores were vast, but a diligent search should turn up something. If nothing else, this was much better than being tricked into believing in something that didn't really exist. As I'm sure you know, the sores are like a giant web. If the thrall potion ended up down there, then we shouldn't have to worry about anyone drinking it. Even something like that will quickly dilute to the point of losing its efficacy if it ends up in sewage. Of course, I still think we'll be able to find some clues as to how we can reproduce it. But if it's consumed before it dilutes, Citri said. The sores are inhabited. What if that includes a sore beast? Over several centuries, the imperial capital had expanded to an impressive degree. The sores were built shortly after the capital had been relocated and had grown labyrinthine over the years. At some point, it grew too complex to be fully managed by humans and became part of the underworld. Many different creatures lurked in the sewage that flowed beneath the city. Rats, cockroaches, spiders, and other small creatures. There were also people who had been banished from the surface world. And there were monsters. Rumors of fiends living in the sores formed their own genre of urban legend. These lords of the underworld lurked in the sore water, swimming through the maze of tunnels in search of new prey. It was commonly supposed that there were aquatic monsters that had spent many years living underground and growing powerful, but nobody had proven or disproven this. Whenever teams went down to perform maintenance, they did so in large numbers, a policy that was the result of the many knights and hunters who had been killed surveying the sores. The lords of the sores didn't attack large groups. I didn't think the Thousand Tricks would have any interest in urban legends. Hunters are generally curious people. Anything that drank the strawberry blaze should be unable to move for the time being. Perhaps if we went now, even a small team would be enough to conduct an investigation. Not a bad idea. I also know a few nobles interested in those fiends. Even if they were enough to become subjects of urban legends, fiends were still living creatures. If they drank undiluted strawberry blaze, they'd be helpless. A captured fiend could be useful for alchemical research. Likewise, reactions from a creature affected by the thrall potion could help determine the potion's components. Since the Thousand Tricks was getting rid of it anyway, there was nothing wrong with trying to snag some of it for themselves. Nikolov figured that if he brought Citri along, that man wouldn't do anything bold. Get ready, Citri. We're going underground. Not that I need to tell you, but don't forget your protective gear. This is all in the name of advancing the Primus Institute. If they could understand even a bit about the thrall potion's components, getting arrested would be a small price to pay. Nikolov forgot his earlier indignation as he turned around and began giving orders to his former apprentice. Before the worship hall of the imperial capital's Church of the Radiant Spirit stood the man in charge, Edgar Winwood. He let out a sigh as he gazed up at the crucified Murrin's lament. The church's hands had already been full dealing with this nightmare, and now the return of the vanished priests had been added to the chaotic mix. Nobody understood what was going on. Many of them had disappeared years or decades ago, and their identities were yet to be verified. All they knew for sure was that these priests had been released by the 1,000 tricks, the man who had taken that chest off their hands, and that he had used the phrase spirited away. I can't fathom how he possibly could have found the missing people in just half a day. Terms like skilled no longer feel sufficient. I'd say your friend is on the world's good side. Ansem, childhood friend of the 1,000 tricks and symbol of the capital branch, nodded. Sometimes, there are people who can accomplish feats unimaginable to an ordinary person. Edgar had been quite surprised when Ansem first introduced his friend. Even now, that young man's flaky demeanor hadn't changed. Yet during the purification, that man had held the attention of Captain Franz, branch manager Gark, Ark Rodin, and many other notable hunters. He must have been born under the star of a champion. Spirited away, was it? Edgar said. Regardless of how it happened, the fact is that he saved our friends. With this and Murrin's lament, we're in his debt. Our priests may not care much for him, but courtesy must never be neglected. The reason so many priests weren't fond of that young man was because he was the leader of that party Ansem belonged to, Grieving Souls. They regularly heard of the party's fierce battles. Word of how Lucia Roji had cast an advanced offensive spell over Ansem was already beginning to circulate. Nobody was going to hear something like that and walk away with a good impression. Ansem had become a hunter before he joined the church, and he didn't seem to mind getting hit by the spell, but human emotions were complex. Their current top priority was dealing with Murrin's lament, but once the noble shaman arrived and completed the purification, Edgar was considering formally inviting the young man to the church so that they might clear up any hard feelings. That young man had saved the vanished priests. Edgar didn't think his cohorts would repay such a debt with disrespect. Still, Edgar said with a pained sigh, "Spirited away. I don't know which spirit or god did that, but I feel we have too many troublesome deities in this world of ours." There was the celestial god from the shrine of the celestial god, the level 10 treasure vault that once manifested outside the imperial capital. A good while ago, there was the executor, the god sleeping in the shrine of the holy king, which was the vault that raised the level of Xerxes Zequens, the most powerful hunter alive. Humans were right to fear the phantom gods that manifested from extreme concentrations of mana material. Some research even suggested that several past civilizations had been destroyed by such supernatural entities. Thinking about this caused Edgar to remember something Ansem had once said. "That's right," he said, placing a hand on his chin, "the heavenly fox you met in Peregrine Lodge was another such god. The divine have really taken a liking to you and your friends. I just hope it isn't an ill omen." Did Ansem really understand what Edgar was saying? His reticence was one of his few flaws. The return of the vanished priests meant more fighting power for the church. Reportedly, some of them were capable casters. The recently exhausted priests would also likely be recovered by the time Lapis and her party returned with the noble shaman. With renewed determination, Edgar knelt down next to Ansem, looked to the sky, and offered a prayer to the great god of light.